Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel in comments below. We love to know what you want to hear next.
Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 121, Many Rules in Capital City. The young patriarch also took out a bone and drew the 5 elements realm circulation diagram he had seen in the ruins. However, it was also incomplete. I only saw this much. Because this diagram was simply too incomplete, therefore I didn't carve it in Hall of Azure Yang. Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. He drew out the incomplete circulation diagram of 5 elements realm he had seen in Doom Suppression Palace. Comparing it with the picture the young patriarch had drawn, the incomplete portions of these two diagrams were different. If they were overlapped together, some of the missing portions could be patched up. Qin Mu then drew a new picture beside them. The missing portion in this new picture was only in the area of his left shoulder clavicle. However, despite missing the cultivation technique for his left shoulder clavicle, now he could completely execute Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to cultivate. The young patriarch carefully sized up the new picture he had drawn and pondered for some time. He used the fishbone to draw a few strokes on the left shoulder area and said, "I'll use my understanding to complete this circulation diagram for you. However, my patching might not be correct and will definitely be a little different from the original one. When you fight with others and circulate your vital chi, there would still be a slight flaw. If your opponent's ability is mediocre, they won't discover your flaw. If your opponent's eyesight is very good, I'm afraid your left shoulder will be your lethal weakness." Qin Mu's heart was shaken and he immediately said, "Patriarch, how good must the opponent's eyesight be to be able to see this flaw?" The young patriarch pondered for a moment and replied, "Celestial being or life and death realm." Qin Mu felt relieved and smiled. "Why would I go provoke that kind of strong practitioners? There are also some youths who have very good eyesight even though their realms aren't that high." The young patriarch said indifferently, "For example, there are some youths like this in Imperial College. Don't think highly of yourself. Now isn't the era where you can shake the world with just 1 or 2 techniques that the old ancestors had passed down. If your path in divine arts doesn't improve and only relies on the 2 moves the ancestors had passed down, you will sooner or later be eliminated by the others. You know why I wanted to become the Grand Chancellor of Imperial College? I did it to read through all the teachings of this world and to witness a new era." His gaze had a hint of sadness as he continued in a low voice, "It's a pity I won't be able to see it." Even though he took life and death lightly and wasn't sad about that his life was coming to an end, he felt sorrow about the fact that he couldn't witness the arrival of a new era because this new era was pushed into motion by him. "It's okay if I couldn't see it." The young patriarch raised his spirit and smiled. "But you can see it. Young cult master, never stop moving. You must broaden your horizons and broaden your mind." Qin Mu bid farewell to the young patriarch. This elder had given him a different impression than the rest of the elders in the village. The impressions the villagers in disabled elderly village gave were that they were a bunch of nice old guys. Even though they were also fiendish, one would discover they were all very kind after being in contact with them for a long time. They taught Qin Mu how to conduct himself and taught Qin Mu the methods to survive. And the young patriarch didn't teach him these. What the young patriarch used was a method to guide him patiently and systematically to stand at a higher place to look at the world. The height one stood determined the world one saw. The chickens and sparrows flew low so they could only see stuff like chicken coops and grass huts. Thus they could only catch worms and peck at the grains on the ground. An eagle spread its wings and its gaze could see 1,000 miles. The land within 1,000 miles was its territory to catch its prey. To become the sacred cult leader of Heavenly Devil Cult, he would need to have the boldness to see 1,000 miles. To Qin Mu, the most practical gain from this was still the 5 elements realm circulation diagram of Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. With this diagram, he could continue to cultivate, otherwise he would be stuck in 5 elements realm. He returned to Scholar's residence and tried to execute Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to circulate his vital chi according to the circulation diagram he had sorted out. The circulation path of Overlord Body 3 elixir technique's 5 elements realm was more complicated than before. It was another technique above the foundation of Dowing technique and Spirit Embryo Realms technique. Qin Mu browsed through all the techniques in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and even though there were many mystical techniques in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, there were not many that were comparable to the circulation path of Overlord Body 3 Elixir Techniques 5 Elements Realm. The circulation path of Overlord Body 3 Elixir Techniques 5 Element Realm was like executing 3 layers of techniques at the same time. By executing the simplest Dowing technique, it would spur the circulation path of Spirit Embryo Realm, which would then spur the circulation path of 5 Elements Realm. It was quite complicated. This time, his vital qi burst forth vigorously and circulated according to the circulation diagram. Suddenly his consciousness split into 5 and surged into his 5 elements divine treasure along with his surging vital qi. The 5 big stars in his 5 elements divine treasure suddenly lighted up radiantly. However, this time the 5 elements didn't mutually obliterate each other. Instead, a starlight shot down from the gold element star and fused with one of his consciousnesses, transforming it into a golden god. The gold god had tiger claws, white fur, a snake hanging on the left ear, feet stepping on 2 dragons, and held a bronze battle axe. Qin Mu carefully executed his vital qi to circulate, allowing the apparition of the gold god to continuously absorb the gold element starlight. The starlight formed the apparition of Gold God, and this starlight was called Star Force, the power of the stars. At the same time, a starlight also shot down from the wood element star and fused with his another consciousness, turning it into a wood god. The wood god had a human head, bird body, bird feet which were stepping on 2 dragons, and held a willow whip. A starlight also shot down from the water element star and fused with his third consciousness, transforming into an apparition of a water god that had a human head with red hair, snake body, and held a trident. The glow of the fire element star shot out and fused with his 4th consciousness, transforming into an apparition of a fire god that had a human face and beast body. The fire god was stepping on 2 dragons as well and held a fire bottle gourd. The glow shot over from the earth element star fused with his last consciousness and turned into a human head and snake body apparition of earth god that had 2 doors behind. The doors even had writings on them, but because it was an apparition, the writings were blurred and couldn't be seen clearly. His vital qi fused with the apparitions of these 5 gods. His vital qi and star force were actually changing slowly into each other. This situation was puzzling. The vital qi converted into star force and the star force converted into vital qi. Is there any change with them converting into each other? Qin Mu was bewildered as he carefully experienced it, but he couldn't find what was different. He only felt that when his vital qi had converted into star force, he could faintly feel an indescribable force stirring in the starry sky. He was unable to find out what kind of force it was. And when the star force turned into vital qi, he discovered his cultivation had increased slightly. That's not a bad thing. He let out a thorough sigh of relief. Even though the circulation diagram of 5 elements realm still had a little flaw, it was good that he could still cultivate and won't have qi deviation happening easily. There's still some time before Imperial College starts their lessons. I should go back to Rain Listening Pavilion and fetch Hu Linger over. Furthermore, I also promised to continue seeing patients from Flower Alley. Qin Mu walked out of his residence and saw a crowd of scholars walking over. The area where he was staying was separated from the divine arts practitioners. It was the place where scholars of Spirit Embryo Realm and 5 Elements Realm resided. All the scholars that were lower than 6 Directions Realm stayed here. Now that Imperial College was opened again, many scholars from previous years had returned from outside. They had entered college earlier than Qin Mu and had dense cultivation, but as long as they hadn't break through 6 Directions Realm, they would still stay here. Every year Imperial College give 10 places to primary school scholars, and it was difficult for primary school scholars to break through to 6 Directions Realm within 3 to 5 years. Therefore, the number of primary school scholars in Imperial College wasn't low. These scholars passed by Qin Mu, and a scholar sized up Qin Mu before asking, "This junior brother, I've heard an abandoned person from Great Ruins had come here. Do you know where he stays?" Qin Mu was startled and asked, "Why is senior brother looking for him?" The scholar replied, "Abandoned people are scums who can only be slaves. I never expect the emperor to let the abandoned person be a scholar of our Imperial College. This is an insult to us. We've heard news regarding this matter and are seething with fury. Thus we plan to make him back out and leave Imperial College. If he stays here, how would we still have the face? Qin Mu's gaze flickered. So I see. I have seen the abandoned person before and he lives nearby. Why don't let me lead you there? The 10-something scholars couldn't help being delighted and all bowed with their hands in front. Thanks for the trouble, junior brother. Fellow senior brothers are polite. Qin Mu continued. I'm also from a famous family in power, yet I have to be classmate with the abandoned person. I'm so ashamed that I couldn't want more than anything to dig a hole to crawl into it. That's right. My surname is Qin. Surname Qin. The scholars were all astonished and one of the scholars greeted him respectfully. So brother is from Qin family. The Qin family of the capital city is indeed an influential family. It's really an insult to be classmates with an abandoned person. Qin family has lots of good generals and the whole family is loyal and righteous. I may have entered 2 years earlier than you, but I don't dare to call myself as your senior brother. We'll refer to each other as brothers. Another scholar laughed. My father opens mine in Tiger Traveling Mountain and would also transport a few hundred abandoned people over that are bought from the borders. A few hundreds of them would die every year, so we got no choice but to continue buying. Hee, never would I expect to seek knowledge in the same school with an abandoned person. If my father knows it, he would definitely blow up and say I'm associating myself with a slave. A female said, I've heard about the matter this time as well. The emperor took the chance to beat senses into his ministers. That's why he had let the abandoned person into Imperial College. He also actually had the desire to swallow up great ruins. He admitted that abandoned people were also people of eternal peace. Isn't this admitting that great ruins is also the lands of eternal peace empire? However, the emperor was inconsiderable and placed the abandoned person in Imperial College, neglecting the feelings of us scholars. Qin Mu and these scholars had come to the end of scholars' residence as they chit-chat along the way. There was only one courtyard near the end which was secluded. Qin Mu smiled. Fellow senior brothers, this is where the abandoned person resides. Please wait a moment. He went up to knock on the door and after a while, the door of the courtyard opened and a circular face popped out from behind the door. Seeing Qin Mu, he was startled and smiled. Brother Qin. Qin Mu pushed the door open and entered it along with everyone, squeezing the scholar with chubby physique in the middle of the courtyard. Qin Mu closed the doors of the courtyard and secured the door bolts. His expression was like still water. That's right. Fellow senior brothers, does Imperial College permit murder? The scholars were all startled and one of them broke out into laughter. Brother Qin, we're only trying to teach the abandoned person a lesson and chase him out of Imperial College. Is there a need for murder? If we kill him, we'll all be chased out of Imperial College. Just giving him a beating is enough. Qin Mu was somewhat not happy and grumbled. There are so many rules in the capital city and I can't kill people at will. If it was in our great ruins, no one would say anything even if I killed 10-something people. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 122. Unrivaled in 5 elements. The moment he said that, all the scholars in the courtyard felt something was not right. At this moment, rain started falling from the sky. Accompanying the rain was a strange temperament. Deng, deng, deng. It was as if an incomparably majestic giant was using the heaven and earth as gouging and the lines of rain as strings, strumming recklessly and regardless of the consequences. However, this weird temperament had a kind of magical power that could steal one's soul. The instant they heard it, they felt their vital chi scattering and their consciousnesses loosening up. Their spirit embryos became slow and their 5 elements became messy. They couldn't help but dance along with this temperament. As the temperament resonated and worked up, everyone in the courtyard knew it was bad and was about to break the spell of this devil voice when Qin Mu suddenly formed a mudra with one hand and gave a punch. Sunshine refining Yang soul in the sky. With this punch out, a world-shaking rumble came from the middle of the courtyard and whacked their spirits and souls upside down. With their souls shaken and their will unstable, they instantly couldn't resist the devil voice and started dancing and laughing loudly in this courtyard. Suddenly the temperament changed once again, and they felt like they had sunk into the slaughtering grounds of the gods and devils with iron horses and golden spears coming right in their faces, drowning them. Such a realistic scenario made them attack back. The retaliation was no small matter. Even those who still had 10% of their consciousnesses had no choice but to defend against the attacks of the people beside them. As long as they raised their hands to deal with it, their consciousnesses would be invaded by the temperament and they would suddenly lose guard. Boom! Various moves burst forth in the courtyard and spells flew in all directions. In an instant, everyone's body was covered in blood and many of them were in pain. Pain helped them regain their consciousnesses. At this moment, Qin Mu moved like a phantom among them, and anyone who was awake was flicked away by his finger. Thunder fingers of the pipa player. His fingers accompanied the temperament to flick, strum, pluck, bow, pick and strike to its extreme. The temperament that made them deranged was accompanied with sounds of thunder exploding, air vibrating. The sounds of heavy objects smashing came out continuously as well. A moment later, only Wei Yong was left in the small courtyard dancing and singing. Qin Mu stopped and the rain in the sky vanished along with the temperament. Only then did Wei Yong regain consciousness and looked around at once. When he saw that his courtyard was full of footprints and the flowers and grass in his courtyard were all destroyed, his expression changed hugely and he cried out, "Brother Qin, what happened? I borrowed your precious land to teach a lesson to a few senior brothers with no eyes." Qin Mu smiled. "Your place is secluded so no one would stop me when I beat them." Wei Yong was stumped for words and immediately looked at the walls of his own courtyard, only to see the bodies of the scholars hanging on the wall. Their heads were stuck within the wall and they had no strength to move. Wei Yong's face turned ashen. "Brother Qin, you're in trouble. These scholars entered Imperial College earlier than us, and which one of those who could enter Imperial College is not from a powerful family? Now that they are beaten up by you, how can this be?" Qin Mu was bewildered. "If I don't beat them, do I wait for them to beat me? I've already beaten them up. What can I do now?" Wei Yong stamped his foot repeatedly and said, "You borrowed my courtyard to beat them up, but they can't do anything to me since I'm from the Wei family. However, you are definitely going to be out of luck." Oh dear, what are we going to do?" Qin Mu walked out and smiled. "They were trying to teach me a lesson, so they should have been prepared to receive a lesson." Walking out of the courtyard, he saw heads on the other side of the wall. Looking at all of them, Qin Mu walked towards them. "Abandoned person." A scholar woke up and said exhaustedly, "You dare to scheme us. When we recover, you're dead." Qin Mu's expression sank. "If you dare to mention abandoned person again, I'll beat you every time I see you." Abandoned person. Qin Mu pulled the scholar out and brought him to the front of the residence. With his vital qi burst forth, he straightened out the scholar's body and used the blood on his head to write on the wall like a brush. Qin Mu wrote down 2 sentences and another line of words on the crossbeam of the door before striking the scholar on the floor. This scholar was struck into the ground and only his head was left out. He was so angry that he fainted again. The other scholars woke up one after another and pulled out their heads from the wall. They all appeared ashamed, looked gloomy. When they had let their guards down and suffered Qin Mu's attack, he didn't attack their physical bodies but attacked their souls instead. That was the hardest to guard. If the attack was aimed at their bodies, it was easier to guard against. Their cultivations were not inferior too much to Qin Mu's and they had more people. Even if Qin Mu sneaked an attack, he could at most down 1 or 2 people. However, skills that were aimed at the souls and spirits were different. Qin Mu used the improved thunder fingers of the pipa player to directly control their souls and consciousnesses. When they tried to break free, sunshine refining Yang's soul in the sky made them lose control of their souls, instantly falling into Qin Mu's attack. Before they could even retaliate, they have all been knocked unconsciousness with their heads through the wall. Wei Yong immediately said, "Various senior brothers, I'm from the Wei family of the Duke's Manor. I'm unrelated to this." The 10-something scholars looked at each other and one of them sighed. "We had fallen head first and got schemed by the new boy, losing all our faces. Brother from Wei family, please do not tell people what had happened and save some face for us." Wei Yong let out a sigh of relief and said, "Be at ease. I'm always tight-lipped and I won't tell anyone what happened here. Fellow senior brothers, what's your plan now?" "Well, naturally have to find our faces back." Many scholars had no face to continue staying and swarmed out. "This was really embarrassing. We'll heal our injuries and restore our dignity tomorrow. He could catch us off guard today, but tomorrow he's going to get it." Wei Yong was speechless and muttered, "Brother Qin is becoming more and more powerful." Not taking him beating Taoist Ling Yun into account, he managed to create such a move that even I was controlled by his devil voice when I wasn't careful. However, now that these people have their guards up, he's going to suffer tomorrow. After all, these scholars had come to Imperial College a few years earlier than us and had studied and comprehended more than us. The floor of heavenly records in Imperial College stores all the ultimates arts of various sects and cults. As the 10-something scholars passed by Qin Mu's courtyard, they raised their heads by accident and saw 2 lines of bloody words written on the wall. The unrivaled one that sweeps the capital, kicking away all 800 Imperial scholars. For words were written on the crossbeam of the door, "Unrivaled in 5 elements." And in front of the door was a guy still stuck in the ground. Everyone's face turned black and they pulled this guy out of the ground and said, "We'll leave these words here and shame him tomorrow." Qin Mu bought some food to fill his stomach and continued to see the patients in Rain Listening Pavilion. He was already slightly famous in the capital city, and even nobles had heard about the young divine physician in Flower Alley that specialized in dubious and hard cases in gynecology. There were also men who had come because of his reputation, and Qin Mu didn't reject anyone and cure everyone who came. However, there were also some cases that he couldn't cure. This illness was very weird, and there was no reason yet. The people gradually grew thinner day by day. The people that were carried over looked so thin that only skins and bones left in their bodies. There were 5 of them that had contracted this illness and got carried in by a few soldiers. Qin Mu looked for a while and said, "This is shaman's poison. If you had brought them here earlier, I could still cure them. But now they are dead and I can't save them anymore." The soldier in the lead exploded in fury and shouted, "You quack! They are clearly still breathing and alive, yet you say they are dead. What logic is that?" Qin Mu shook his head. "They have already died. Only their bodies are still alive. They have suffered the shaman's poison from Barbarian D Empire. Shaman's poison is different from ordinary poison. Ordinary poison affects the body and nervous system, while shaman's poison affects their souls and spirits. Their souls had been poisoned and have been dead for 5 to 6 days. This person has died for over 10 days. The soldier's eyes became red as he said, "We have come from the borders and we are currently waging a war at the borders." They had been shown on the battlefield by a mirror from a barbarian with long horns. They then started to become skinnier. No matter how much they eat, they wouldn't gain weight. Even spirit pills and miraculous medicine couldn't help. The military physician had said he couldn't save them, and if they stayed at the borders, they could only wait for death. Thus General had let us send our brothers back. "Divine physician, you must save my brothers." Qin Mu shook his head. "Their souls are already dead. I can't save them. Go back." The soldier bawled his eyes out and brought the rest of the soldiers to carry these 5 men away. Qin Mu suddenly said, "This general, let me write a prescription for you. If anyone suffers this kind of poison again, you can use my prescription to save his life." That soldier immediately stopped and Qin Mu raised his brush to write down a prescription for him. This prescription is called Pure Yang Refining Bug Pill. It could restrain the attack of the soul bugs in the shaman's poison. The soldier was surprised and delighted. He suddenly kneeled down on the ground and heavily kowtowed. Qin Mu immediately helped him up. "What's the need for this?" The soldier wiped his tears and turned to leave. Qin Mu retracted his gaze and continued to sit down to treat the patients. Shaman's poison was a kind of poison he had heard from apothecary. It was a shaman's spell. Great shamans would usually use poison bugs to refine poison, absorbing the poison bug's souls and poison into his own soul. When they killed enemies, they didn't need to directly poison them and only needed methods like attacking with innuendo to poison the opponents, which was very strange. The shaman's poison and shaman's spell were also skills that were aimed at the souls, poisoning them. They were completely different from ordinary poison and couldn't be detoxed by ordinary antidotes as they were useless. Shaman's poison was aimed at the soul, therefore, the method of poisoning couldn't be comprehended by logical means. For example, painting skills, cutting a paper man and writing the taboo name and birth date on it and using a needle to stab it. When stabbing it with a needle, the shaman's poison in his own soul would be planted in the opponent's soul. Or perhaps they could prick a straw man or shoot arrows at the straw man, killing the opponent's soul in 7 days. These were all shaman's poisons and shaman's spells, very bizarre. Qin Mu treated another few people, and suddenly a sedan chair came into Rain Listening Pavilion, and an elder in official robes came down. He personally walked up to Qin Mu and cupped his hands in a greeting. "Little divine physician, help!" Qin Mu was puzzled. Seeing the second-ranking high official robe that the elder was wearing, he should be a chancellor in the imperial courts. "Old Mister's complexion looks good. Why do you need my help?" The elder said, "There's a patient in my family and is seriously ill." Countless physicians and imperial physicians had taken a look, but there was no use. "I've heard a divine physician have come to the city. Therefore, I'm here to invite divine physician to help." Beside him, Fu Qingyun giggled. "Lord Yen hasn't been to Flower Alley for a long time." That elder's expression turned slightly red and he coughed. "When did I come here before? Sister Fu, I don't even know you. Don't joke around. Divine physician, can I invite you up the sedan and follow me to save a life?" "It's really to save a life." Qin Mu hesitated for a moment and entered the sedan. The elder also walked into the sedan and 2 strong men lifted the sedan chair up. They leaped up and traveled away on the clouds. Qin Mu raised the curtain to look outside and saw the sedan floating towards the center of the capital city. Reaching the center of the capital city, there were lotus flowers formed by golden light in the sky, and on it stood golden armored generals that were guarding the skies of Imperial City. Their strength was extremely terrifying. These golden armored generals paid no attention to the sedan and allowed it to travel into Imperial City. Qin Mu let down the curtain and faced the elder. "Lord Yen, the origin of the patient in your family seems extremely important." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 123. As Glorious as a Song. Lord Yen brushed his mustache and smiled. "If it's not important, I wouldn't come here personally to invite you, the divine physician. Scholar Qin, the emperor didn't look into the fact that you were an abandoned person. Do you know who made that happen?" Qin Mu was startled. When Emperor Yanfeng had given a fervent speech at Imperial College and became worked up, he had thought that Emperor Yanfeng was trying to take the chance to use his identity as an abandoned person of great ruins to knock the senses into his ministers. From the meaning of Lord Yan's words, it seemed like it was part of his efforts. "I'd like to hear the details." "At that time I told the emperor that you were the divine physician that could treat that person. Therefore the emperor didn't look into why an abandoned person like you could avoid the inspection mirrors and enter eternal peace." Lord Yen gave a slight smile. "If I hadn't said that, you thought you could become an imperial scholar? An imperial scholar is an 8th-ranking official position after all. How can it be anyhow granted to a person abandoned by gods that had sneaked into our eternal peace empire? This is a crime of disrespecting gods." Qin Mu's gaze wavered and he sighed. "If I can't cure that person, my head," Lord Yen smiled, "will be gone." Qin Mu's face turned black. When the sedan landed on the ground, the strong workers lifted the curtains and Lord Yen gave a smile as an indication. Qin Mu took in a long breath and stepped out of the sedan. Lord Yen also got down and led the way while warning in a low voice. "That person has an extremely big influence, so you can't be impudent. Do you understand?" Qin Mu followed closely and smiled. "Of course I won't be impudent in regards to my life and Lord Yan's future." Lord Yen gave a smile and said unhurriedly, "Good that you know. My grandson is also in Imperial College and he entered there 2 years earlier than you. If you can cure that person, I can let my grandson take care of you. My grandson is also talented and entered Imperial College at 5 Elements Realm." Qin Mu had a weird expression. "I wonder if his grandson is among the scholars I beat today." This was the inner courtyard of the Imperial Palace, and it looks like where the chambers of Imperial concubines were located at. With gates to palaces one after another and the deep courtyard, Qin Mu could see some palace maids and white-faced men without a mustache. Are these the said eunuchs? Qin Mu thought to himself. Lord Yen led him to a huge palace with a deep courtyard, and despite this place being at this moment, there were 20 to 30 people in the palace hall, and most of them were palace maids and court eunuchs. There were also a few imperial physicians waiting upon beside the jade bed, and the jade bed had a veiled curtain separating it. A person laid inside, and it was very likely a woman. Flower Alley's divine physician is here? An imperial physician swept his gaze across Qin Mu and sneered, Lord Yen, you're getting muddle-headed. You actually dare to let someone who treats cathouses girls come to treat Emperor Dowager. You're getting extremely daring. Lord Yen said indifferently. Imperial physician Xiao had also said so then, and then he died. That's right, little brother Qin. I've forgotten to tell you. Imperial physician Xiao and these imperial physicians are all physicians of Imperial College's Hall of Supreme Healing. They will be the ones to teach you medical knowledge in the future. Qin Mu bowed to these imperial physicians, and they all sneered, kept their hands behind their backs without returning the greeting. Imperial physician Chu sneered, roaming around to cheat at such a young age? Your pill refinement technique is probably still half-baked, right? Qin Mu let out a radiant smile and was like a sunshine boy. Teachers, Imperial physician Xiao had also said that. Then he died. The faces of the few imperial physicians turned black. Qin Mu went forward and came to the jade couch. As he sat on the jade chair, he greeted, Empress Dowager. A hand stretched over from the veiled curtain and leaned on the side of the couch. Qin Mu checked her pulse and turned around. Does anyone here have a silver needle? An old imperial physician passed his silver needles to him, and Qin Mu took out a silver needle, poking it on Empress Dowager's fingertips. Lord Yen coughed and said softly, Mortal crime. Lord Yen will carry it together. Qin Mu's vital qi burst forth and lifted this drop of blood in the air as he concentrated his gaze on it. Open! He gave a low shout, and his heaven's eyes awakened as he looked towards the blood. At the same time, his 5 fingers which gripped tightly suddenly opened up, and that drop of blood instantly expanded and turned into a huge bright red ball. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment before shouting in a low voice again, Open! Countless of formation markings revolved around his pupil, and he formed the second heaven, green heaven's eyes. Qin Mu only felt that his vital qi was lacking, and it was hard to maintain for long. He turned his head back and asked, Lord Yen, can you lend me your vital qi cultivation? Lord Yen went forward, and his vital qi surged through his body as he asked softly, Little divine physician, are you confident? Qin Mu's body trembled violently. As Lord Yan's vital qi surged into his eyes, layers of his god eyes awakened and allowed him to see this blood clearly, and everything that was hidden inside couldn't escape from his sight. Blind had completely imparted 9 heavens eye-awakening skill to him, but due to Qin Mu's current cultivation, he was still unable to open all 9 heavens and could only borrow Lord Yan's cultivation. 2 rays of divine lights about a foot long shot out from Qin Mu's eyes. Suddenly Qin Mu lifted the veiled curtain, and the divine lights from his eyes increased sharply as he shone it on Empress Dowager, who was on her bed. That Emperor Dowager absolutely didn't expect him to be so daring to actually lift her veil curtain. She immediately looked at him, and her gaze was like thunder from a clear sky, showing her power without anger. Qin Mu locked his gaze with her, and the divine lights from his eyes dispersed. I've made out Empress Dowager's illness. Empress Dowager is poisoned. Even though Emperor Dowager was lying on her bed and her beauty had aged, it could still be seen from her manner that she was the motherly model of the empire then, a figurine that's rarely seen. She shut her eyes and asked, My body has been getting weaker day by day. Some of the imperial physicians of the Imperial Physician Bureau had said it was an illness, and others had said I'm poisoned, but there was no final conclusion. How are you sure I'm poisoned? The poison Empress is suffering from is called 1000 opportunity poison. Qin Mu continued, It is a refined, unusual poison, which ingredients are 1000 of poisonous substances closely linked with one another. Once 1000 opportunity poison is refined, the toxicity will have constant permutation, and there is practically no antidote to detoxify it. Any antidote would just create another change in the toxicity and cause the antidote to be useless. The more times you treat it, the toxicity will grow and the torture would be fiercer. Empress had been poisoned for a long time, but luckily Empress has a dense cultivation, and these imperial physicians had not treated Empress and had instead used spirit pills and miraculous medicines to extend Empress's life. Otherwise, it would be inconceivable. The minds of the few imperial physicians from the Imperial Physician Bureau trembled violently as they looked at each other in silence. Empress Dowager panted and asked, "Imperial physicians, is there such a poison?" Imperial Physician Yu bowed and said, "To answer Empress Dowager, there is such a poison. I've heard this poison was refined by Jade Face Poison King. However, no one has ever seen it, therefore." Empress Dowager sighed. "You can't cure it?" The few imperial physicians all looked ashamed as they lowered their heads in silence. Empress Dowager gasped for her breath and her gaze fell on Qin Mu. "How about you, little divine physician? I have a solution." Qin Mu smiled slightly. "However, I need to know what medicines Empress Dowager had consumed since you were poisoned and their prescriptions as soon as possible. Also, I need 1,023 palace maids as well as brush, ink, and 1,023 tablets." Empress Dowager waved her hand weakly. "Go see to it." Not long later, the brush, ink, and paper were prepped. All the palaces of the imperial concubines were busy summoning all the palace maids from each and every courtyard over. The Imperial Physician Bureau was also sorting out what medicine Empress Dowager had taken after getting ill. Qin Mu raised his brush and wrote down the name of every poisonous substance and a number on each tablet. He got busy until midnight when he had finally finished writing. Meanwhile, the lights were brightly lit outside the palace hall, and more than 1,000 palace maids stood outside in silence. Qin Mu ordered men to distribute out the tablets, and every palace maid held one tablet with the name of a poisonous substance. The palace maids followed Qin Mu's instruction and formed themselves in a strange formation. This formation was very complicated and was formed by multiple patterns. The first pattern only had a palace maid raising her tablet as she stood straight. The second pattern had 2 palace maids. The third pattern had 4 palace maids, followed by a pattern formed by 8 palace maids, and next was 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, and 512. When the palace maids were arranged properly, Qin Mu looked at the prescriptions of the medicine Empress Dowager had consumed over these years. He started looking from the first medicine, and when he was finished, he immediately called a few numbers and made these palace maids swap their locations once they heard the numbers. The formation formed by 1,000 people immediately changed. After that, Qin Mu looked at the second prescription and shouted numbers out again, making the palace maids that were called out swap their positions and changing the formation again. Qin Mu looked at prescriptions after prescriptions, and the formation changed and changed again, along with the positions of the palace maids. The few imperial physicians revealed incomparably shocked expressions. A white-haired old imperial physician said in a trembling voice, "Never would I thought I could see this kind of method in my lifetime. I've no more regrets even if I die now." The other 3 imperial physicians nodded their heads and sighed. "We had originally looked down on him. Never would we expect him to recognize 1,000 opportunity poison, and to use such a marvelous method to calculate which step the 1,000 opportunity poison has changed into." The imperial physicians were deeply moved. Qin Mu making the 1,000 palace maids stand in positions while holding tablets was to form the structure of poisons that were mutually checked after 1,000 opportunity poison was formed. He then changed the palace maids' positions according to the effect of the medicines Empress Dowager consumed on the structure of 1,000 opportunity poison. These about 1,000 palace maids had formed a huge and complicated abacus, and the palace maids were the abacus beads which helped him calculate which step 1,000 opportunity poison had now transformed to in Empress Dowager's body. This kind of method was brilliant, and these imperial physicians were admiring endlessly. Qin Mu calculated all the way until daybreak, and he finally finished calculating all the prescriptions. Meanwhile, the palace maids raising the tablets and stood all night were also exhausted. Qin Mu took a look at the final positions of these maids and the tablets on their hands, as well as the final formation formed by the 1,000 poisons. He calculated for some time and shut his eyes. Some more time later, Qin Mu opened his eyes and raised his brush to write down his prescription. The few imperial physicians came forward and lowered their heads as they looked at it. They all nodded their heads and flailed their limbs in excitement. Lord Yen also moved closer to look, but he didn't understand any of it. He then asked in a low voice, "Imperial physicians, how is this prescription?" That imperial physician Chu looked at Qin Mu in adoration and exclaimed in admiration, "The prescription is beautiful and is glorious as a song. Little divine physician uses a substitute technique to use a poison to replace the great poison in the center on 1,000 opportunity poison. Do you see that? That's the one. Once that is replaced, the toxicity of the other 1,022 poison substances would subdue each other and their poisons would be dissolved by themselves. Magnificent, truly magnificent." The other imperial physician Yu exclaimed, "Imperial physician Shao didn't die for naught. For him to die in front of little divine physician, he had died at his appointed place." Lord Yen shook his head as he thought to himself, "Those that learned the art of healing are all lunatics. What's so magnificent about this? The crucial point is it is effective. If it's not, my official position and his head would both be gone." Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 124. A Stroke of Genius. The few imperial physicians immediately grabbed herbs according to his prescription, and not long later, the herbs were collected. The few imperial physicians stood there motionlessly and had faces of anticipation as they waited for Qin Mu to refine the medicine. Qin Mu's vital qi burst forth and lifted the herbs up. He didn't use a pill cauldron and refine the herbs in the air instead. He exhibited all his refinement and extraction techniques and didn't use water to brew it. He directly extracted the medicinal energy out from the herbs and used his vital to cure and fuse them. His fingers moved up and down like a music score, making the old white-haired imperial physician Yu welled up with tears. This kind of refinement technique, it's enough to be able to see once in my lifetime. Imperial physician Yu sighed ruefully. Qin Mu had no other thoughts in his mind and focused on refining medicine, so he couldn't hear their words. If he heard it, the youth would definitely twitch his mouth. His refinement technique was only barely passable. In the eyes of Grandpa Apothecary in disabled elderly village, he was only just through. Not long later, the spirit medicine was refined and the few imperial physicians were intoxicated from the sight. Imperial physician Chu said, "Little divine physician, just now you used this kind of hand technique to prod the water ripples to extract the medicinal energy by water. But why did it suddenly change to fire?" Qin Mu placed the spirit pill he had refined in the jade goblet on the tray and said, "Those herbs require mutual aids of fire and water. Therefore water should come before fire in order to fully extract all the medicinal energy." Imperial physician Yu's hand technique changed as he controlled his vital qi to cure the herbs and asked at once, "Little divine physician, is the imitation of my hand technique similar?" Qin Mu took a look and commented, "Your vital qi circulation is slightly rough, and the marvel of my refinement technique isn't in the technique but in the clever use of vital qi. Your vital qi will have to rotate around 12 times, and only then would it be brought to the point of perfection." Imperial physician Yu suddenly saw the light and asked fervently, "I had only cared about the surface. And also when you were refining 5 fortune seed, did you pay particular attention to the technique you used?" The few imperial physicians surrounded Qin Mu and discussed enthusiastically. Lord Yen gave a huge frown and said in a low voice, "Everyone, you can discuss later. Empress Dowager is still waiting." The few imperial physicians came to a realization, and Imperial physician Chu hurriedly said, "Little divine physician, Empress Dowager is the priority." Qin Mu ordered, "I still need 1,023 three-legged blue-eyes toads." The eyes of Imperial physician Chu and the rest lit up. With their hands on their bellies, they all laughed heartily in admiration. "A stroke of genius! A stroke of genius! I am completely convinced. Quick, quick, go buy the 3-legged blue-eyes toads." The palace's maids and eunuchs immediately went to the market to buy the blue-eyes toads. After half a day, the blue-eyes toads were all bought. They were all the size of a fist and had 3 legs. Qin Mu made them place the blue-eyes toads in the palace hall and let all the palace maids and eunuchs fall back. He then offered a spirit pill to Empress Dowager and said, "When the main poison of 1,000 opportunity poison is replaced by the poison in the spirit pill, the other poisons will crumble and the toxicity will instantly become violent. These poisons had been in Empress Dowager's body and had combined with your vital qi, thus they already had spirituality. Blue Eyes Toad are beings that consume poison, and these toads will take the chance to eat the poison in Empress Dowager's body, and Empress Dowager would be cured. Empress Dowager waved her hand and said, "All of you fall back in case the toxicity hits you." Qin Mu, few imperial physicians, and Lord Yen retreated out the palace hall. In the hall, Empress Dowager took the spirit medicine, and at the beginning, she didn't feel anything odd, but the next moment, the medicinal effect suddenly burst forth and a strange poison surged out from the spirit pill, replacing the main poison of Thousand Opportunity Poison in an instant. Empress Dowager puked out a mouthful of jet black blood, spewing them all over the jade bed and veil. Following that, Empress Dowager felt that the poisons breaking out in her limbs, bones, and even skins. When the main poison was replaced, the 1022 poisons instantly erupted and clashed against each other, causing her to feel a gut-wrenching pain. Just as these strange and great poisons erupted, the toxicity fused with her vital qi. Empress Dowager gasped for her breath while her face and skin had turned completely black as she was about to fester and die. Her vital qi was now taken over by all 1022 poisons, and with her vital qi circulating throughout her entire body, the poisons were brought all over her body as well. This caused her to lose control of her vital qi and was immediately going to die from the poisoning outbreak. Suddenly a rush of medicinal energy surged forth from the spirit pill she had consumed, and this medicinal energy actually surged through her entire body in an instant, even deep into her divine treasures. The vigorous medicinal energy suddenly forced all her vital qi out of her body. Even the vital qi in her divine treasure was forced out. A loud bang rumbled from inside the hall. Even though Empress Dowager was poisoned for dozens of years and her cultivation was not like before, her vital qi was still incomparably dense, and the moment her vital qi left her body, they actually transformed into more than 1,000 poisonous substances that flew around the jade couch continuously. There were all kinds of venomous scorpions, snakes, bugs, ants, beetles, and other substances which were formed by her vital qi. Croak, croak, croak. The croaking of frogs came from inside of the palace hall, and the three-legged blue-eyes toads suddenly started to croak. As they opened their mouths, long tongues flicked out and caught the poisonous objects that were formed by vital qi and strange poisons, swallowing them into their bellies. In an instant, the palace hall regained its brightness. There was still one blue-eyes toad that had not eaten a poison yet, so it leaped onto the jade couch and sucked in a breath of Empress Dowager, causing her to puke out blood uncontrollably, along with a venomous bug. This bug was the poison that Qin Mu had concealed in the spirit pill to replace the main poison. After this blue-eyes toad had eaten the venomous bug, it hopped off the jade couch. Empress Dowager felt her spirit refreshed and her body was very light. She immediately got up from the couch, and she felt that the illness that had plagued her for several dozen years was completely gone. Thus she felt extremely delighted. Men! The palace doors opened and a group of palace maids and eunuchs immediately came forward. When they saw the jade couch and veil curtain all covered in poisoned blood, they couldn't help feeling shocked. Furthermore, toads were hopping everywhere, which was slightly frightening. Qin Mu and the few imperial physicians also hurried over, and Empress Dowager looked at Qin Mu with a smile. Truly a divine physician. Bring these blue-eyes toads to Clear Ripple Pond. They have done a good deed for me, so let them live in Clear Ripple Pond. The eunuchs and palace maids immediately did as they were told. Lord Yen was surprised and delighted, and he immediately ran out. I shall inform His Majesty of this great news. Empress Dowager walked towards the outside and smiled. Divine physician, it's a little dirty here, so let's talk outside. Qin Mu replied, understood, and followed her out. The few imperial physicians immediately followed them as well. Empress Dowager looked at the sunshine outside and used her hands to cover her eyes while smiling. I have not been out of this palace for a long time. Thousand Opportunity Poison is a poison jade face poison king created. Imperial physician Chu nodded his head and said, It is said that Jade Face Poison King had disappeared about 200 years ago. This person was ruthless and killed countless of experts with poisons and offended too many people. However, no one knew his true identity. It is said that his disciple Little Poison King had betrayed him and revealed his true identity. Incapable of having a foothold here anymore, he sliced his face off and left. Empress Dowager nodded her head and said, "I've heard of this before. Come to say of it, I also met that jade-faced Poison King before and even had a few trysts with him. Back then, even I was head of heels for him." The few imperial physicians didn't dare to say a word. Empress Dowager continued in a gentle voice. "Who would have thought that the world-famous playboy you was actually the notorious jade-faced Poison King? After his secret was revealed by his disciple, it had hurt the hearts of God knows how many young maidens. When the former emperor had died, I had taken a fancy to this playboy you and met him a few times. When he was at the end of his rope, I told him I could protect him. There were also some other loathsome women that also wanted to protect him. In the end, those wretches didn't win me and I didn't win them either because he had left. Thinking back now, destiny was really making a fool out of me. For the strange poison that had caused me to be bedridden for over dozens of years was my lover's." The forehead of these imperial physicians was filled with droplets of sweat as they felt that their heads were going to roll for hearing this secret. They were all secretly regretting that they hadn't left with Lord Yen. Qin Mu's heart wavered slightly. This jade-faced Poison King gave him a familiar feeling. He couldn't be Grandpa Apothecary, right? In that case, does Empress Dowager know who poisoned you? Qin Mu asked. "It won't be Playboy you." Empress Dowager smiled. "In that case, it would naturally be Little Poison King Fu Yuanqing. I've heard that Fu Yuanqing had sought refuge with Imperial Preceptor, and his poisoning me was naturally Imperial Preceptor's intention. Imperial Preceptor had wanted me to die for a very long time. It must be because I couldn't stand by idly and watch some of his way of handling thus. He wanted me dead to prevent me from blocking his path." These few imperial physicians' faces turned ashen, and they suddenly knelt on the floor, not daring to stand up. Empress Dowager smiled. "Imperial Preceptor even dared to poison me, and if he isn't scared, why are all of you scared? Stand up and talk." Imperial Physician Chu and the rest stood up while trembling and were all quiet out of fear, not daring to say a word. Empress Dowager looked at Qin Mu and suddenly asked, "Your master is Playboy you, right? How is he?" "The Playboy you she mentioned must be Grandpa Apothecary. How to solve 1,000 opportunity poison was also taught to me by Grandpa Apothecary. For one to have such understanding of 1,000 opportunity poison, it can only be the creator of 1,000 opportunity poison." Thinking of this, Qin Mu bowed. To answer Empress Dowager, "He is very well." Empress Dowager let out a sigh of relief and asked softly, "Did he send you to save me? I am still in his heart." Qin Mu blinked his eyes innocently and felt that she had overthought, but it wasn't good to say it out. Empress Dowager was also slightly tired since she had just recovered from her illness. She waved her hand and said, "All of you must be tired, go back early to rest." Qin Mu said, "Understood," and the few imperial physicians felt like a boulder was lifted off their shoulders. They left with Qin Mu and didn't walk far when they heard shouts, "Get out of the way!" Imperial Physician Chu hurriedly pulled Qin Mu to the side of the path, and they saw Emperor Yanfeng walking over in quick steps with his imperial bodyguards running behind. There were also palace maids carrying imperial canopy following behind quickly. Other than the emperor, there were also some men and women dressed luxuriously. They should be imperial consorts, princes and princesses. "The one that herds cows." A surprised and clear voice sounded from the crowd, and it was slightly familiar. Qin Mu raised his head to have a look, and there was a young girl in the crowd that looked bright and beautiful. "Cowherd boy, it really is you," the young girl asked in delight. "Why have you come all the way here?" Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 125. Senior Brother Little Poison King. Qin Mu was slightly stumped. This young girl looked slightly familiar, but he couldn't recognize her in a sudden. That young girl was pushed forward by the crowd while she waved her hand. "Cowherd boy? Where do you stay? I'll go find you." Imperial College. Qin Mu waved towards her and suddenly a light flashed through his mind. That's right. She's Ling Yuxiu. How come she looks different from last time? The Ling Yuxiu before was about the same height as him, and now she was even taller than Qin Mu by a few inches. Furthermore, She had become such a big maiden now, looking very lovely and moving. When she had waved at him earlier in the crowd, he hardly recognized her. It's good that her face is still chubby and hasn't changed, Qin Mu said in gratification. Imperial Physician Chu and the rest looked at him with a weird expression. Imperial Physician Yu, elder than others, was more kind-hearted and reminded him, "Little divine physician, if you say that to a girl, especially a princess, your head will roll." Qin Mu was bewildered. Why? The words we praise girls pretty in great ruins are all words like sturdy, good at giving birth. Even though Princess Yushio isn't considered sturdy, it's good she's a little chubby. I think she will be good at giving birth. These words can be used to praise girls? The few imperial physicians understood tacitly, and they all had an expression that this fellow was hopeless. He would sooner or later be beaten to death. Imperial Physician Mu said, "Little divine physician, let us return to Imperial College. After a night of torment, it's really getting unbearable for our old bones." After leaving the palace, Qin Mu split paths with the few imperial physicians. He returned to Flower Alley and ate breakfast at Rain Listening Pavilion. After bidding farewell to Fu Qingyun and the rest of the girls, he brought his luggage and Hu Linger back to Imperial College. Imperial College, Scholar's Residence. Qin Mu walked towards his own courtyard, and Hu Linger popped her head out of his backpack and looked around curiously. From far away, Qin Mu could see that a few rows of scholars sat in front of his courtyard. These scholars sat upright, and they all had sword cases beside them. With their left hands on the sword cases, they all had a solemn expression. The person in the lead sneered towards the courtyard. "Abandoned person, you should have woken up, right? Could it be you're scared of us? If you were scared, then come out and wipe away the words on the wall." Another scholar sneered. "All we have is patience. Is hiding in your house forever the best you can do? I would like to see how long you can hide. Weren't you very cocky yesterday? You actually dared to leak out how you schemed us yesterday and let the whole Imperial College know, making us look bad. How come you are hiding inside now? Are you going to hide like a tortoise? The reason we had left your words up there is to shame you, to make you embarrassed. We are going to make the entire Imperial College know that you are merely an abandoned person from the lands of barbarians. We are then the authentic ones." Qin Mu walked forward and passed by them while thinking in bewilderment. When did I ever leak out what happened? All the scholars' gazes turned blank as they stared at him while he pushed open the door and walked in. They had originally thought that Qin Mu had hidden in the room and didn't dare to come out. Never did they expect Qin Mu had been out, making them waste half a day outside shouting for nothing. Qin Mu came to the central room and placed his backpack down. "Linger, go tidy up the room and the blankets. I'll be out for a while." Hu Ling replied yes and asked, "What's young master going out for?" Qin Mu didn't turn his head and replied, "These people are too noisy. If I don't beat them up, it'll be hard for me to fall asleep." Hu Linger could only control the wind to tidy up the room. At this moment, she suddenly heard a huge rumble, and she immediately looked out of the window and saw a scholar flying up into the sky before falling back down head first. Next, Qin Mu's voice came from outside. The rumblings of thunder were like thunders exploding in the clear sky. Hu Linger heard a whooshing sound which should be a human body breaking through the air, but she couldn't see anyone flying in the sky and could only hear a heavy object crashing in the distance. Next, Qin Mu's voice sounded out again. Sounds of water surging and huge waves smacking as the raging waves splitting the shore. Among the sounds of churning waters, another miserable scream sounded out and silence followed after. Only Qin Mu's voice could be heard. Next, Hu Linger quickly tidied up the room, folded the blankets and placed the bedsheets. She then took out the items in the backpack as she thought to herself, "If I tidy fast enough, I can still go out to have a look." The sounds of clashing traveled from outside, which were earth-shaking, and the miserable shrieks also never stopped. When she had finished tidying up and ran outside excitedly, she instead saw Qin Mu walking back in from outside, looking a little tired. "Young master, it had ended?" Hu Linger was slightly disappointed. Qin Mu nodded his head and gave a yawn. "I'm sleepy and I'm going to sleep first. Don't run around." Hu Linger nodded her head and popped her head out of the door. She couldn't help getting a fright when she saw scholars scattered everywhere on the road of scholars' residence. Some of them were sprawled out on the floor while some were hanging on the opposite walls. There were some hanging on tops of trees and some being embedded in wall far away. Some were thrown into the canal beside the road and others were planted into the ground with 2 legs sticking out which would twitch from time to time. Hu Linger stuck her tongue out and ran over to search the scholars' bodies. She took down all the jade pendants, spirit pills, jade bracelets, hairpins, and etc. before delivering them back into the house. Linger, what are you doing? A sleepy voice came from inside the house. Hu Linger replied in righteousness and confidence. Devil Ape had said, win, snatch, rule. Qin Mu's snores sounded out and he shouldn't have heard it. Hu Linger ran out again to carry in the scholars' sword cases, and one of the scholars woke up and grabbed onto his own sword case weakly. Hu Linger spat out a whirlwind which swept the sword case up to smash the scholar in the head. The scholar's head became completely covered in blood, yet he still wouldn't faint. Hu Linger smashed a few more times and that scholar finally fainted. Hu Linger gave a sigh of relief and swept that sword case to send it back to the courtyard. That scholar secretly peeked, and when he saw this fox walking away, he finally let out a sigh of relief. Ah, he's awake again. Hu Linger saw him peeking and cried out in surprise. The scholar then saw a tornado sweep up a rock that was as big as a small mountain to smash to him, and he immediately fainted. This time he had really fainted from fear. Hu Linger placed down the rock and started hopping around to loot everyone as she went further and further away. At his moment, a scholar in the distance woke up and saw this fox pillaging all the treasures on the scholars' bodies. He immediately struggled to crawl away, but he was discovered by Linger, who dragged him back into scholars' residence. That scholar howled miserably all the way and then fell silent. The fox had knocked him out. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's Mansion. Imperial Preceptor's Mansion was grand and gorgeous, but the place where he cultivated was very simple. It was only a huge hall that was empty and had no other stuff. If one raised his head to have a look, he could see an extremely spectacular sight. No roof, but the sky could be seen above the huge hall. The countless stars seemed to become extremely low and could be grabbed. There was the marvel of formation spells. 30,000 yards above the ground, there was a formation floating there which was formed by countless of transparent glass, and a few of Imperial Preceptor's disciples were there managing the formation. This formation was formed 30,000 yards above the ground and had a radius of 66 hectares. It was gathering starlight, and through the transparency of the glass, the starlight directly shone through the roof of the huge hall. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was gathering the starlight to cultivate, therefore his cultivation was extremely high. At this moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had a haggard aura as he was currently recuperating. There was a black-clothed man beside him, who was currently concocting medicine. Suddenly a red-color flying bug flew over and came to the ear of the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man's face was full of warts that looked like the ones on toads. Warts covered his entire face and he looked frightening. He nodded his head repeatedly as if he understood the words of the red flying bug, which was very weird. Imperial Preceptor, my junior brother has arrived. The black-clothed man was the little poison king that Empress Dowager had mentioned, and his name was Fu Yuanqing. He continued. He had antidote the 1,000 opportunity poison in Empress Dowager's body. Eternal Peace Empire opened his eyes and let out a strong smell of blood from his mouth. He asked puzzledly, how did you know that it's your junior brother who had antidote the 1,000 opportunity poison in Empress Dowager? 1,000 opportunity poison is my master's proudest work. The only ones who can antidote this poison is only me and him. The warts on Fu Yuanqing's face twitched, and he explained neither too fast nor too slow. The little bug had told me that a youth had arrived, therefore it's obviously not my master. That could only mean it's his new disciple. I had thought he was already dead, and I never expected he would still be alive and even taught a little junior brother out. Imperial Preceptor, now that the poison in Empress Dowager's body is antidote, do you want to poison her again by feeding her another strange poison? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shook his head. There's already no need. Fu Yuanqing didn't understand. There's no personal grudge between Empress Dowager and me. She had only opposed to me pushing for a political reform for the sake of her son's empire. His Majesty became hesitant due to this, therefore, I had ordered you to poison her, not for the sake of killing her. It was just to make her unable to meddle with the politics of the imperial court. Without Empress Dowager's meddling, His Majesty could now put his heart and soul into pushing for a political reform. Now that my influence is already stable, there are half of the people in all levels of society supporting the political reform. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor continued, and the ones that oppose me are currently taking the chance to revolt. My plan has already succeeded, and with the current general trend, even Empress Dowager can't stop me. Fu Yuanqing smiled. You talk about the general trend, but I talk about gratitude and grudges. Your injuries are almost healed, and it's useless for me to stay here, so I'm going out to take a walk. Now my junior brother is here. Shouldn't I visit him as his senior brother? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor warned. You need to be careful. Empress Dowager won't do anything to me, but she can still put you to death. Fu Yuanqing hesitated for a moment, and the warts on his face trembled randomly. He grumbled resentfully. You are the one that ordered me to poison her, so why will she kill me instead of you? How innocent am I? Did you forget that you betrayed your master? Furthermore, Empress Dowager had a history with your master, and with her intelligence, she will definitely know that the person that had cured the poison is your junior brother, and you will definitely want to find him. She will definitely be waiting for you to take the bait and kill you, taking revenge for herself as well as for your master. Fu Yuanqing's head started to ache and could only drop this thought. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 126. Etiquette. When Qin Mu had woke up, it was already in the evening. The youth was desiring to get some water from the courtyard to wash him. When he walked out of his room, he saw over 10 sword cases in the courtyard. Other than sword cases, there was also a pile of items like jade pendants, hairpins, jewelry, and etc. Qin Mu was bewildered and heard a sound coming from outside the door. Is it Sister Fox Immortal? I'm here to redeem the items of my house's young lady. Have a look. Hu Linger's voice sounded out. The money is not enough. The sword case, hairpin, bracelet of your young lady are all no ordinary items. This amount of great abundance coins isn't enough. What's Linger doing? Qin Mu was bewildered. He was sleepy-eyed and had yet washed up, so it wasn't good for him to go out now. Thus he got some water to wash his face. Meanwhile, the voice outside carefully smiled apologetically. My young lady had only given me this bag of money, and there's simply no more. May Sister Fox Immortal please make things easy for me. This sword case is from Imperial College, and the hairpin and bracelet are given by the elders in young lady's family. Fine, wait here for a moment. The door opened and Qin Mu saw Hu Linger running in like a wisp of smoke with a bag of coins behind her. This white fox used her spells to raise a whirlwind, sweeping up a sword case and a few pieces of jewelry as she rushed back in excitement and handed it over to the person outside. The person was deeply grateful and said thanks, then left. Qin Mu washed his face and brushed his teeth with a wooden toothbrush. The little white fox running back in. She only noticed him now and was surprised. Young master is awake? Young master, we have money now. When she said that, she opened the door to the room and Qin Mu saw over 20 bags piled on the floor. Hu Linger opened a bag of coins and great abundance coins flew out to the ground. Qin Mu was flabbergasted and didn't know what to say. Hu Linger was proud of herself. Young master had beaten those scholars, so they were embarrassed to come to redeem their items by themselves. They could only send their servants over to redeem their stuff. Thus we had made a big profit. Qin Mu washed his mouth and let out a murky breath while shaking his head. Linger, this isn't kind. I had already given them 2 beatings. Now you had pillaged them and wanted their ransoms. It's slightly too much. Now that they had given the ransoms, how will I have the cheek to beat them again? Hu Linger stuck out her tongue and was slightly upset. You had already beaten them once already? Young master didn't pillage them the previous time you beat them? Isn't that a huge loss? Young master knows our great ruins rule more than anyone else. You had said before that snatching things with our own ability couldn't be called stealing. Qin Mu shook his head. You snatched their stuff and took their money. I'm afraid that my hands would get weak from collecting money. Fine, we have almost run out of money anyway, so this money could sustain us for a while more. You cannot snatch their stuff next time. We'll snatch again when we run out of money. In that way can the thin streams flow forever. Hu Linger nodded her head repeatedly and said, Young master is awake, so I shall prepare some food. Why do you need to prepare food? Now that we have money, we can go eat any delicacies in the city. You can choose any dish soever you like. They went out excitedly with the fox carrying the coin pouch. The numerous scholars staying in scholars' residence all closed their windows and doors when they saw Qin Mu and the fox walking by, not daring to face him. Qin Mu was bewildered. These scholars had said that the entire Imperial College had known that he had beaten them, but he definitely didn't leak out what happened. Who was the one that had leaked it out then? Besides scholars' residence was Royalty Park, and the people living inside were all princes, princesses as well as lords from aristocrat families. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had implemented a rule that children of royalties had no need to take the examination and could enter Imperial College at 15 years old. However, the royalties had respectable identities. Therefore, they couldn't stay together with ordinary scholars. Thus another park was opened up. Wei Yong was currently laughing with a few royalties. You didn't know that our scholars' residence was bustling with activities. That Qin Mu has beaten up the scholars again, and they are extremely miserable. Don't say I'm the one who said it out. A royalty asked puzzledly. This person from Great Ruins is actually that strong? He's still okay. Wei Yong bragged. His ability is about the same as mine, just that his moves are peculiar. I feel that those fellows from scholars' residence are too useless. Another royalty laughed. The fellows from scholars' residence are always conceited and contemptuous. They felt that they had fought their way in with their ability and always looked down us royalties. Now they had met their nemesis. Qin Mu walked out of scholars' residence and a youth appeared in front of him. The youth was travel-worn and was carrying a huge luggage that was as tall as a human. The backpack was squarish and a few weapons were stabbed in it. Even though he was travel-worn, he looked very martial and had an air of slaughter on his body, giving off an invasive feeling. The two of them met face to face and Qin Mu was invaded by his invasive feeling, thus his body automatically gave a defensive pose. Under the pull of the qi activity, that youth also had no choice to stop in his steps. Even though this youth had an air of slaughter, his actions were very formal. He bowed in a greeting. Newly arrived junior brother? Qin Mu returned the greeting. I've just entered. Senior brother has just returned from outside. I've taken the chance to go to the front lines of the army during my vacation. That youth smiled. I'm called Chan Wanyun. Since junior brother has newly arrived, you can find me if you need anything. Qin Mu reported his name and the two of them parted ways. Until the qi activity tangled up with them had vanished did they feel at ease and walked away with wide steps. This new junior brother is very strong. Chan Wanyun looked back and gave another glance at Qin Mu as he thought to himself. Big brother is back. Scholars' residence was in jubilation. Numerous scholars walked out from their own residences and welcomed Chan Wanyun. Chan Wanyun smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, we have merely parted for a month. Is there a need to miss me so much? And why do all of you have injuries? Senior Sister Chu, even you are hurt? What's going on? The scholars of scholars' residence all looked ashamed. That Senior Sister Chu was called Chu Ting, who replied shamefully, Big brother, you have no idea. Recently, an abandoned person of Great Ruins came to the school, and he has a very strong power. During the entrance examination, Taoist Ling Yun was injured by him using a wooden sword and got embarrassed in front of the emperor. The emperor allowed him to enter our Imperial College. We were angry about that decision, so we wanted to force him to leave Imperial College. How can a slave be our classmate? Chan Wanyun said, Taoist Ling Yun is very extraordinary. He is able to hurt Ling Yun. It means that his capability is astonishing. You went to provoke him, of course you would be beaten. At the same realm, how could any of you be Ling Yun's opponent? Chu Ting argued. What kind of identity do we have? In our eternal peace, abandoned people are slaves and slaves are the same as livestock. Having livestock as classmates, aren't we going to be livestock in the eyes of others? Imperial scholars are 8th-ranking officials after all. Is an abandoned person also worthy? How would we save Imperial College's face? Furthermore, junior brother, we got beaten by this abandoned person, and it is not us beating him. We even got beaten twice. Chan Wanyun was flabbergasted and said, all of you have gone to beat him, so it's natural for him to beat you. You can't blame him. When you had lost, he didn't let you go but beat you again. That is his fault. All the scholars were even more ashamed and didn't say a word. Chan Wanyun saw their expressions and asked in suspicion, he didn't give you a hassle. You went to pick on him again because you were indignant in losing and ended up being taught a lesson again by him. Am I right? Chu Ting immediately said, now it's no longer a personal grudge but the face of our scholars' residence. How can scholars of eternal peace lose to a barbarian from outside the sphere of civilization? This matter has already been spread throughout the whole mountain. It was this abandoned person who had spread the news out, making it hard for us to back down. He even robbed us and pillaged all our valuables, making us have no choice but to redeem them back, shaming us even further. Chan Wanyun's expression turned grim. Where it is possible to let people off, one should spare them. Isn't what he has done a little too overboard? Don't worry, I'll handle this. Also, all of you are too useless. To be actually beaten so miserably by a newly arrived scholar, useless. All the scholars lowered their heads and Chu Ting muttered, if he hadn't schemed us, we wouldn't have. Chan Wanyun sneered. I had met a junior brother outside just now who is called Qin Mu. This person is very remarkable. There is still a murderous aura around my body after leaving the battlefield, and he could already detect it before I even came in front of him. His chi activity was locked onto me and forced me to go into a defensive position, stopping to return greetings with him and reported our names to ease the enmity. This is the state which an imperial scholar should have. He continued with a deep voice. I had once gone traveling with Teacher Ba Shan and met the sect master of Heavenly Flag Sect. Back then Teacher Ba Shan and Heavenly Flag Sect master moved closer and closer to each other before finally stopping in their footsteps to greet each other and parting their ways. I always didn't understand why was there such a sight, and at that moment where I met junior brother Qin Mu, only then did I understand what Teacher Ba Shan had experienced when he met Heavenly Flag Sect master. In the martial world, when you meet etiquette, it might not be as you expected and a fight is secretly concealed in it. If you don't go out for experience and only hide away here, you will never understand that feeling. When you are unable to see that kind of battles, you will definitely lose. All the scholars became more and more ashamed, and Chu Ting muttered, Junior brother Chan, the abandoned person that had beaten us is called Qin Mu. So it was him. Chan Wanyun was slightly stunned and looked pensive. No wonder. All of you didn't lose wrongfully. Defeating you, what's the need for him to sneak attack? Suddenly a surprised cry sounded out. Senior Sister Qinghong is back. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 127. Show your weapon. Chan Wanyun turned around to have a look and saw a young lady in green walking to Scholar's residence. The young lady's clothes were neat and her beautiful hair was coiled up by a muslin net with a golden sword hairpin inserted. She was also travel-worn as she had rushed back from another part of the country and should have just disembarked the ship. Behind her was a robust man that was extremely tall. His height was twice a human's height, and he was valorous with his body full of fierce muscles. This robust man was carrying the young lady's backpack, and as the young lady walked to Scholar's residence, he was right on her heels. Followed by the robust man, Yu Qinghong kept walking and paid no attention to the scholars that were coming to welcome her. Her gaze landed on Chan Wanyun directly as she walked up to him. When there was still 3 yards between them, Yu Qinghong stopped and the robust man behind her also stopped. Big brother, Yu Qinghong greeted. Chan Wanyun returned the greeting. Junior sister Yu, where did you come from for your training? Yu Qinghong smiled. I've just returned from the battlefield of Wolf Store Country. I heard that Big Brother had gone to the battlefields for training. Chan Wanyun nodded. That's right. I had gone to the battlefield of Barbarian D Empire and fought a few barbarians. You have improved quite a bit. Yu Qinghong smiled. You too. I'm worried that I still can't beat you. Luckily, I subdued a wolf slave at Wolf Store Country. Wolf slave? Come out to meet Big Brother. The robust man behind her put down her luggage with a thud and suddenly stretched his hands out to grab at Chen Wanyun. His aura was surprisingly fierce like fire, and when he grabbed over with one hand, the air instantly turned dry and was even filled with sand's dust. This gave people a feeling that a blazing sun hitting them in their faces. On the exposed chest of the wolf slave, dragon wolf markings actually appeared, and all the scholars were trembling with fear. This dragon wolf's markings were originally a mutation of one of the 4 great spirit bodies, which was called Dragon Wolf Spirit Body, the totem of Wolf Store Country. Chen Wanyun didn't bat an eyelid and just raised his palm to face the huge hand of the wolf slave. Only a rumble was heard and Chen Wanyun's clothing fluttered. The wolf slave's huge body also swayed slightly, and his gaze towards Chen Wanyun became different. With a husky voice, he said, "You're not weak. You too." Chen Wanyun smiled. "Since junior sister you could subdue a wolf slave, it shows that your power has grown rapidly." Suddenly an ethereal voice laughed. "Senior sister you, big brother, you two are flattering each other again. When can both of you be modest and cool like me?" Another youth came forward, and he had no hair on his head. He looked like a monk in white Buddhist clothes, but there were no marks on top of his head. "Junior brother Yun Quebec," Chen Wanyun greeted politely. This young monk should be cultivating Buddhism, but his temperament was obviously not that of a monk. He was very competitive and was very eager to fight. I had gone to Li River, the place of the rebellion. After Li River Sword Sect was exterminated, the other sects there rebelled and caused trouble, thus I had to follow the army to quell the rebellion. These few days I had quite a considerable amount of experiences, and I would like to have some advice from senior brother Chan and senior sister Yu. Yu Qinghong's gaze flickered. From the time we entered college we had begun fighting, and we had always been slightly weaker than big brother. Therefore, you are the big brother of our scholars' residence. However, after the training, I'm afraid that there won't be any big brother in scholars' residence, and there will only be a big sister. Chen Wanyun replied indifferently. I killed barbarians at the border and my power had become fiercer ever since. My murderous intent is too heavy, so I'm afraid of killing any of you when I attack. However, there's actually a ruthless person who just came to our scholars' residence. He is very fierce and tough. Most of the scholars in scholars' residence were beaten by him, so if any of you can win him, I will surrender the position of big brother readily. Yu Qinghong's eyes lighted up. No regrets. Chen Wanyun smiled. When did I, Chen Wanyun, ever go back on the words I had said? This person is called Qin Mu and he wears embroidered clothes with a white fox at his side. Therefore, he is pretty easy to recognize. I had met him as he was leaving the mountain and he should be back soon. Yun Kei immediately leaped away and laughed loudly. Little monk shall go enlighten this Qin Mu. Senior sister Yu, don't fight with me. Let me enjoy being the big brother for a moment. Senior sister Yu saw him off and sneered. This baldy everyday acts like he's a high monk, yet he's the most impatient. If even senior brother Chun finds the person thorny, he would definitely not be easy to deal with. Senior sister Chu, all of you have been beaten by that Qin Mu. Senior sister Chu and the rest looked embarrassed. Yu Qinghong's gaze flickered and asked, Can you tell me what kind of moves did this Qin Mu use? She had a meticulous mind and asked everyone about the moves Qin Mu used to beat them. After a moment, Yu Qinghong already had an idea and said, This person used spells and palm skills, but he didn't use sword skill. He shouldn't have much attainment in sword skill. Chu Ting immediately said, Senior sister, during the examination, he had used a wooden sword to defeat Taoist Ling Yun from Hall of Pure Yang. Defeat Taoist Ling Yun? Yu Qinghong was startled and asked, How many moves did he use? One move. Yu Qinghong's heart trembled slightly and said, It's not difficult to defeat Taoist Ling Yun on the same realm, and I can also do it. But to defeat Taoist Ling Yun in one move, that's impossible for me. He had defeated all these junior brothers and sisters all in one move, with fists or spell. He could actually manage to be proficient in all three arts. Doesn't he have any weakness? No, he definitely has a weakness. Going to the battlefield of Wolf Store Country this time, I had seen weaknesses even on the seasoned seniors, much less a scholar who had just entered. I can take the chance to get to know the situation while Yun Kei challenging him. Putting down the luggage, she immediately brought her wolf slave and left. Qin Mu brought the little fox to a high-class restaurant in the capital city and ordered a table of delicacies. Eating heartily, Qin Mu, who seldom showed his kindness, ordered a jar of fine wine for Hu Linger and drank 2 cups himself. Both of their stomachs bulged from their eating. Hu Linger was still in a daze as she controlled her wind to float back to Imperial College with Qin Mu. After this little fox was drunk, she showed her true self and just lied on the demon wind motionless with her front legs stretched straight out. Her eyes stared forward without blinking, though her stomach was a few rounds bigger. Qin Mu only drank 2 small cups, therefore he was not affected. On his way back, he looked at the cultural and historical attractions of the capital city. The capital city was much flourishing than other places, making people reluctant to leave. Both of them walked into the mountain gate and Qin Mu waved his hand in front of the little fox's face. He only saw Hu Linger eyes remained huge and round, but there was a cat-like snoring sound coming from her throat. It turned out that she had fallen asleep from being drunk, yet she was still controlling her demon wind to float forward. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She carried the white fox off her demon wind and hanged her around his neck. Hu Linger body slumped and curled around his neck. Her tail hanged down Qin Mu's chest and her body squirmed twice to find a comfortable spot to continue sleeping. Alcohol tolerance is so bad, yet she still likes to drink. Qin Mu shook his head and continued his way up the mountain. Hu Linger was in deep sleep and only felt that sprawling on Qin Mu's neck was very comfortable. When he was near the broken cliff, Qin Mu suddenly slowed down. Hu Linger felt like there were needles growing out from Qin Mu's neck and was prickling her, so she immediately turned around to change a position, but the prickling sensation was still there. The little fox changed a few more positions, but she didn't feel comfortable. It was as if Qin Mu was turning into a huge porcupine. She squinted her sleepy eyes and stretched her sleepy paws out to touch Qin Mu's neck. She didn't find any long spike, but the spiking sensation was really there. Could young master be showing his true form? The white fox was still bewildered while Qin Mu had stopped. Only now did Hu Linger notice someone standing on the steep cliff in front of Qin Mu. The long white robe of the monk fluttered in the wind as he stood on the cliff, looking towards them. Qin Mu, that monk in white asked. Qin Mu nodded his head. Yes, you are. The monk in white raised a palm in front of his body. With a warm smile, he looked like a Buddha and his ethereal voice sounded like the voice of Buddha. You have been unruly and hard to tame, so little monk is specially here to enlighten you and subdue your unruliness. Show your weapon. Qin Mu was puzzled and said, Senior brother, you have yet said your name. The monk in white had a face full of excitement and his appearance of Buddha had vanished without a trace. Leaping down from the cliff, he fell head first to attack Qin Mu while smiling. When you're enlightened by me, you will naturally know my name. With his body in midair, a dragon roared and an elephant trumpet suddenly sounded out. Raising his head to take a look, Qin Mu saw Buddha's ray shining brilliantly as a huge Buddha, which was coiled up by a huge dragon, rode a white elephant and came crashing down. This was a vision which was created by the vital qi of the monk in white. His vital qi was much denser than the other scholars and didn't yield much to Taoist Ling Yun's. This kind of attack should be a fist skill with incantations mixed with it. Incantations were attacks targeted at the soul, while the coiling dragon and riding elephant fist skill was an attack targeted at the physical body. 2 of the attacks gathered as one to formed the vision of a coiling dragon roaring and an elephant trumpeting while being ridden on. This attack, which was nearly a divine art, was enough to show the superiority of this monk in white. Qin Mu's spirit rose greatly and he couldn't help feeling slightly excited. He had finally met an expert. From the time he came to the capital city, the scholars he had met were all like Chu Ting. Even Directorate Taoist Ling Yun was disgraced by just one sword from him, making it hard for him to fight to his content. The monk in white, who didn't wish to say his name, was obviously very strong, which aroused his battle spirit. Ever since he stepped onto the lands of Eternal Peace Empire, he had tried to act civilized and he was very tired of it. In his bones, he was still a person abandoned by gods that belonged to the barbaric lands of great ruins. As an abandoned person that wasn't cared by gods, He was a fierce and tough being that dared to go down the rivers to kill flood dragons and up the mountains to capture strange beasts with a knife. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 128. Traces of Clouds and Shadow of Sparrows. Qin Mu laughed loudly and his body gave a tremble, sending Hu Linger away. Bending both his knees, he suddenly leaped up and raised his hands towards the sky as he faced that huge Buddha who was riding an elephant and had a dragon coiled around. Thunderclap 8 strikes 6th form. Thunder circling 10,000 Buddhas. Boom! The sound of thunder occurred at the same time in midair as one figure rose into the sky while the other one descended rapidly. A frenzied look appeared in Qin Mu's eyes as he raised his head to look at that figure falling down. Just as Yun Kei landed on the ground, rumbles of thunder sounded in his ears, and he saw Qin Mu's punches coming. Every punch burst forth with thunder rumbling which could grab the heart and soul of people. Dong, dong, dong. Qin Mu's footsteps were extremely heavy, like a huge elephant stepping on the ground. With all the muscles in his body throbbing, he made use of the movements of all his muscles to push his strength to its maximum. When their punches had collided, Yun Kei's expression changed slightly and felt that the opponent's vital qi was boundless and completely crushed his vital qi. He immediately changed his steps and fell back while frantically defending against Qin Mu's punches. He could only feel that all his tricks, his intricate and extremely wonderful moves couldn't be executed, and he could only use his fists to block his opponent's fists. There was absolutely no time and any possibility to execute his moves and spells. Lotus Throne Mudra, Lotus Flower Precious Body, Precious Flask Mudra. Yun Kei gave a shout and a golden light shone brightly around him. With a mudra out, a lotus throne appeared below his feet and there were Sanskrit surrounding his body and circulating non-stop. These Sanskrit formed the shape of a precious vase and allow Yun Kei to hide in the vase. Qin Mu's gave another punch and the thunderclap exploded out. Any golden bell, lotus throne or precious flask were all shattered. Yun Kei's fists were already badly battered and blood had splattered onto his clean white Buddhist robe. The bright red stains on it looked like plum blossoms. However, the plum blossoms soon faded away. His white clothes should be a treasure as well which didn't stain or get dirty. Yun Kei's arms turned soft and he almost couldn't lift his arms. His moves became slower and he knew it was bad. Qin Mu then gave a punch to his face and smashed him into the jade wall of the cliff. He slid down and fainted. There are still experts in Imperial College. Qin Mu felt happy both mentally and physically. It was just that he had yet stretched his bones and the monk in white was already knocked out by him, making him feel that it was a pity. Any monk that appeared could take so many of my blows. Patriarch is right, the people in Imperial College are still brilliant. I can't discriminate the people of Eternal Peace Empire. Young master, you are already done? Hu Linger only had time to stabilize herself, and before she could enjoy watching the show, it had already ended. Thus she couldn't help feeling slightly disappointed. She immediately went forward to dig around Yun Kei's body, trying to find valuable things. After a moment, the little fox grumbled angrily, "Poor monk, Linger. His clothes are not bad and should be worth quite some money." Qin Mu prompted her with good intentions. Hu Linger stripped off the monk's robe. The clothes were indeed untainted by even a speck of dust and couldn't be tore, making the little fox very happy. This monk will definitely bring lots of money to exchange for this clothes. That's right, young master. What is his name? Qin Mu leaped up the jade cliff and continued walking to Scholar's residence while shaking his head. How would I know? I had asked him earlier, but he didn't say. I think he was probably afraid to lose face after he had lost. That monk has a remarkable insight and knows himself well. Not far away, Yu Qinghong suppressed the shock in her heart and brought her wolf slave over. Walking down the cliff to take a look, Yun Kei had lost consciousness and was just lying at the feet of the cliff while wearing a bloody white short pants. His white short pants were not as valuable as his Buddhist robe and were made from normal fabric. Yu Qinghong's eyes lighted up and said, "You go." The wolf slave bowed and obeyed. His hands grabbed towards his back and with two swinging sounds, the two curved knives that overlapped each other behind his back were out of their sheaths. These two pitch-black knives had no impurity in them, as if they were forged by the blackest metal. Furthermore, these two curved and narrow knives were 3 yards long. The wolf slave walked forward with quick steps, becoming faster and faster. He suddenly opened up his hands and his vital qi thread flew out. Using qi to manipulate his knives, he flew the 2 magic knives across the air silently and slashed towards Qin Mu. When the 2 magic knives were about to cut down on Qin Mu's body, the light of the knives suddenly burst forth as a knife stuck close to the floor and sliced horizontally, while the other knife sliced horizontally towards his waist. Qin Mu seemed to have grown eyes on the back of his head. His body suddenly became extremely weird. He suddenly became like a flat fish, stepping on magic knife coming from the bottom with 1 foot and kicked the magic knife coming from the top with another leg. It was so hard to imagine how a human body could bend into such a position. The top magic knife was kicked away and the bottom magic knife was stepped into mountain rock by Qin Mu. The wolf slave was startled and saw Qin Mu rushing towards him like a phantom. The wolf slave's vital qi trembled and the 2 magic knives whizzed back again. The black light circled up and down Qin Mu. The magic knife skills of Wolf Store Country were executed brilliantly by him, but not one knife landed on Qin Mu's body as he dodged them with just a hair's breadth. His knife skill was no normal knife skill and was the slaughtering technique of the battlefield. It had no flashy moves and had only one purpose, which was to kill. Even such sharp knife skill was also unable to touch the body of Qin Mu. However, forced by the knife lights, Qin Mu was also unable to advance. Not only he couldn't advance, he had to fall back continuously. Qin Mu's retreating looked like a slithering green dragon, and the wolf slave's pupils suddenly contracted. This wasn't retreating, it was a coiling dragon. Dragon could be big or small, they could stretch out or coiled up. When a dragon coiled up, it meant that it was ready to strike. The wolf slave was originally a person with a status of Wolf Store Country. Because he was held captive by Yu Qinghong in the battlefield and according to the rules of Wolf Store Country, he became a wolf slave to Yu Qinghong, serving her. However, his ability wasn't much weaker than Yu Qinghong. Furthermore, he had stayed on the battlefield for a long period of time and had experienced life and death fights. Therefore, his battle experience was extremely rich. The look of Qin Mu retreating gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. It was as if he was targeted by a huge, fiendish, strange beast. His magic knives became even faster, but Qin Mu had already stored up his momentum. Suddenly Qin Mu gave a punch which broke his limit, and instantly the roars of dragons came out long and loud. The 2 magic knives lost control and whizzed towards the wolf slave. Along with the magic knives was Qin Mu's vast and overbearing punch. His fist's intention turned into a huge malevolent dragon which pounced directly forward. Wolf slave gave a loud shout and his vital qi burst forth. Instantly a power that was like the bitterness of a blood-red sun in a barren desert burst forth and his shirt ripped open. Wolf dragon markings appeared on his whole body, and he pushed both his palms forward and unleashed all the vital qi he had into both his palms. Bang! A huge tremor traveled out and Wolf Slave's body moved backward. With 2 magic knives stabbing into his ribs, he moved back 30 yards and collided with a mountain rock. Only then did the momentum stop. Linger, there's no need to loot him. Give him some money to heal himself. Qin Mu summoned back Linger, who was preparing to plunder the spoils of war, and shook his head. He had used weapons, so I had struck more heavily. His injuries were not light, and he would spend quite some money to heal himself. Linger pouted her lips. What a pity! Those 2 knives aren't bad. Qin Mu shook his head and left. It's still not as good as mine. However, his power isn't bad and his battle awareness is much stronger than that monk earlier. Yu Qinghong waited for Qin Mu to leave far away before appearing and coming to Wolf Slave's side. Blood was dripping out from Wolf Slave's mouth, and due to the 2 magic knives which had penetrated through both his ribcage, he was nailed to the mountain and couldn't move. Master, I had estimated wrongly. The wolf slave gave an ashamed look. I had used 10 moves, but he had only used 3. Be careful. Just as he said it, Yu Qinghong suddenly felt a warmth behind her back as a body closely stuck to her, causing her heart to tremble slightly. There was a person keeping close to her back and was back to back with her. She was totally not aware when this person had come. At this moment, Qin Mu's voice sounded in her ears. The 2 of them were very close. Senior sister, He is your slave? Did you order your slave to attack me because you think I don't dare to kill anyone in Imperial College? Dense sweats erupted out on Yu Qinghong's forehead. Suddenly her footsteps rapidly touched the floor as she moved away quickly. However, Qin Mu's body was still stuck to her back and a voice sounded beside her ear again. Doesn't senior sister owe me an explanation? Yu Qinghong's scalp turned numb and her body moved rapidly like a phantom with an extremely fast speed. She executed footwork that was like the traces of clouds and shadow of sparrows, but no matter how she moved, Qin Mu still kept close to her back like a shadow following her. Cloud Trace Sparrow Shadow was the best body technique divine art she had learned, and even though she couldn't execute divine art, she could still walk among the clouds and fly low like a sparrow. However, even such a powerful body technique divine art, it was still impossible to shake off Qin Mu. Suddenly Yu Qinghong felt the muscles of the big boy behind her squirmed, as if there were snakes under his skin. She couldn't help feeling a chill down her spine, and even her exquisite skin grew tiny goosebumps from the fear. Sure skill technique of battle technique school. Qin Mu started to move his footsteps, and Yu Qinghong suppressed the fear in her heart to move along with Qin Mu. She knew that the sure kill technique of the battle technique school had to be executed at close range. If she continued to stick on Qin Mu's back and not let him turn, it would be difficult for Qin Mu to execute his sure kill technique. Just now it was Qin Mu sticking close to her, and now it was her sticking close to Qin Mu and following his footsteps, not daring to leave him for even an inch. If she left him, her head and body would probably become separate parts. To be close in by an expert of the battle technique school, it basically meant it was an order for execution. The two of them moved quickly with their backs against each other, and they looked like a dancing butterfly fluttering on the mountains of Imperial College. Many scholars on the mountains all stopped and looked at the two of them, exclaiming endlessly. Qin Mu wore embroidered clothes while Yu Qinghong wore green clothes, and they both looked like a piece of the butterfly's wings. Furthermore, they were sticking close together, therefore, it was easy for people to be lost in wild and fanciful thoughts. A scholar sneered, "A cheating couple, giving off a rotting smell that makes people want to puke in the broad daylight." Suddenly a boom sounded out as Qin Mu leaned back onto the pillar of Hall of Azure Yang. "Linger, let's go." Qin Mu called Hu Linger over. "Don't think about plundering her. If you want to plunder her, you'll have to pull her out from the pillar. She isn't bad as well. She's an expert to be able to keep up with me." Hu Linger immediately caught up and looked backward reluctantly. She only saw Yu Qinghong's smacking face filled into the pillar of Hall of Azure Yang by Qin Mu. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 129. Sword God Hidden Light. The scholars all around were in shock. The scholar who had said about the rotting smell was even astonished. Never would they have thought that the young man and woman who were dancing earlier had turned so ruthless in an instant. That young man in embroidered clothes had directly smashed that young woman into the brass pillar. The sight was so savage that a psychological trauma was left in everyone's heart. Not long after, Chun Wanyun walked over and he gave a smack with his palm on the brass pillar. The pillar trembled violently, and Yu Qinghong, who was embedded in it, fell out like she had got an electric shock. She then covered her face and left. The young woman's face was all badly battered, and she couldn't face the world. She could have left the pillar by herself, but because there were scholars crowding around outside, she felt that she would lose face. Therefore, she had remained in the pillar a while more and planned to leave when there were lesser people. Unexpectedly, more and more people came. Chun Wanyun came to the wolf slave who was nailed by the knives and pulled out both magic knives to free wolf slave. He then jumped off the jade cliff and took off his outer shirt to cover it on Monk Yun Quebec. Once he was done, he then woke him up. Yun Ke looked at his remaining white short pants and immediately knew after he was knocked out. He was plundered by that youth called Qin Mu. She couldn't help feeling embarrassed and ashamed. The value of his white Buddhist robe was extraordinary and even more valuable than normal spirit weapons. Yun Ke had to sell all the valuables he had to accumulate enough money to buy himself a Buddhist robe, yet it ended up getting stolen by Qin Mu. Not long later, Chun Wanyun, Yun Ke, Yu Qinghong and Wolf Slave were gathered back together. Chun Wanyun smiled. "Junior brother? Junior sister? How's Qin Mu's ability?" Yu Qinghong snorted coldly. "You didn't have the confidence to beat him. That's why you had let us be the vanguard to test out his ability? Big brother, aren't you a little too cunning? Chun Wan-yun replied indifferently, all's fair in war. This is what I've learned on the battlefield. I also learned that know yourself and know your enemy to emerge victorious in every battle. Without knowing his weakness, I'll not make a move recklessly. Both your abilities are not weaker than mine, and since you are unable to win him, it would be hard for me as well. Therefore, I can only find his weakness. If even I lose as well, then he would become the big brother of our scholar's residence and become the face of us. Yun Kei was more acceptive and asked, Big brother, what did you observe? His spells, cultivation, moves, battle awareness, techniques and thinking are all first class. Chun Wan-yun continued, he contested his palm strength with you. You cultivate Buddhism and have an extremely dense cultivation. The divine arts of Buddhism have an astonishing defense, yet they crumbled under his palm strength. This means the strength of his cultivation is even higher than yours. Wolf Slave's cultivation is also extremely dense, and knife skills are the slaughtering technique in the battlefields. However, he couldn't do anything to him and instead lost in 3 moves. This means his battle awareness and moves are also top class. And to defeat Junior Sister Yu, he relied on his techniques and thinking. When Junior Sister Yu was checking on Wolf Slave's injuries, he quietly got close and made Junior Sister miss her chance, making you have no choice but to dance together with him closely, and fell into his trap. Yu Qinghong got reminded of the situation where she had to closely stick to Qin Mu, and her face turned slightly red as she gave a cold snort. Chun Wan-yun continued. He used his sword extremely fast to hurt Taoist Ling Yun, disgracing him in front of the palace hall. This means his sword skill is then the strongest. Furthermore, he had defeated over a dozen scholars in scholars' residence by using spells to control their consciousness. Thus he's proficient in spells as well. There's almost no weakness that could be found on this person. Yun Kei and Yu Qinghong became the more astonished the more they heard. Even though Yu Qinghong had asked around the moves Qin Mu had used to defeat the scholars and wanted to achieve know yourself and know your enemy, she still hadn't understood as much as Chun Wan-yun did. Chun Wan-yun had been sitting in the position of big brother for the past few years. He definitely didn't have an undeserved reputation. How are we going to defeat such a perfect person with no weakness? Yun Kei mumbled. Chun Wan-yun said indifferently, this concerns the face of our scholar's residence, the face of our imperial college, the face of us eternal peace empire scholars. Therefore he must lose no matter what. He is an abandoned person who walked out from great ruins. If he doesn't lose, doesn't it mean that our eternal peace empire scholars are inferior to an abandoned person? His spirit roused as he said slowly, he has no weakness in all those aspects, so I racked my brains and tried to search for a weakness of his technique, and I found it. Yun Kei and Yu Qinghong's hearts shook, and they both looked at him. Chun Wan-yun smiled slightly. I found the weakness in his technique. When he executed his technique while fighting you, there was a trace of weakness that was almost undetectable when he circulated his vital qi. That's where his weakness is. I still need to observe him for a period of time to know the exact location of his weakness. Yu Qinghong also accepted wholeheartedly inside. There's a reason why we had lost to you for the past few years. You are really a step higher compared to us. Chun Wan-yun smiled. I wouldn't have improved this fast without you. The momentum of your catching up forced me to put in all my efforts to cultivate. When I discover the exact location of his weakness, I will make my move and defeat him openly in front of all the scholars of Imperial College to protect the reputation of us Eternal Peace Empire's scholars. As Qin Mu walked along scholars' residence, all the scholars looked terrified. It was evident that many people had already seen the scenario that Qin Mu smashed Yu Qinghong in the brass pillar and nailed the wolf slave to the mountain rock. He reckoned that some of them might even have heard the news that he knocked Yun Kei out and threw him at the bottom of the cliff. 2 of the 3 biggest experts of scholars' residence had already been badly beaten by the abandoned person of great ruins. Other than Chun Wan-yun, who else could be Qin Mu's opponent? Qin Mu pushed open the door and walked into his house. After that, a little fox's head popped out and shouted, Is there anyone who still wants these sword cases? If no one wants them, I'm going to sell them to the capital city. Wait a moment. A scholar immediately shouted, Wait a moment. I want to buy back my sword case. And me, don't sell it. I'll come to redeem it when I save enough money. Little fox, my monthly allowance for this month has not yet arrived. Can you accommodate me and let me have my sword case back first? In that case, you will have to write a certificate of indebtedness and take the certificate back when you have the money. Hu Linger finished dealing with the sword cases and grabbed a few certificates of indebtedness back into the house. Young master, can you check if these certificates of indebtedness are written correctly? I can't read. Qin Mu seemed to be smiling yet not smiling at the same time. You can't read and you dared to accept certificates of indebtedness? These certificates of indebtedness are correct. You'll just have to keep them well. Hu Linger was very happy and hurriedly kept the certificates of indebtedness in a hole in the wall. Qin Mu called her over and said, "There are still 2 days away from the start of school, so I shall teach you spirit creation technique." Hu Linger immediately sat down properly and Qin Mu began to explain spirit creation technique. Spirit creation technique was the last writing among the 7 creation writings. This technique could be both cultivated by humans and by demons. After studying great educational heavenly devil scriptures for these few days, Qin Mu discovered spirit creation technique was more suitable for demons to cultivate. Learning from Deaf, he had read a copious amount of books and literature. What Deaf had taught him was not only Ruism, there was also all kinds of ancient poems and was extremely hard to pronounce. However, because of this, it was much easier for Qin Mu to comprehend other scriptures. Qin Mu tried his best to simplify his explanation and make it easier for the little fox to understand the scripture. 7 creation writings belong to the top-tier techniques in Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures, and Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures was a technique that could turn one into God or devil, and it was the supreme holy Bible of Heavenly Devil cult. Spirit creation technique was included in it, so the marvel of this technique was evident. For the next 2 days, Qin Mu simplified the complicated technique and taught it to Hu Linger. In 2 days, Hu Linger was already able to master the basics of this technique and to try to refine her spirit embryo. The original purpose of this creation technique was to change the spirit embryo. If one was a black tortoise spirit body, his spirit embryo would be a black tortoise spirit embryo, and by cultivating the spirit creation technique, one could change their black tortoise spirit embryo into white tiger spirit embryo or other spirit embryos. Even the attribute of the vital qi would change accordingly as well. Thus, this technique was thought as a top-class technique in Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures. Of course, every technique in 7 creation writings was incomparably magical, and it was not only limited to spirit creation technique. The reason why Qin Mu had felt that spirit creation technique was more suitable for demons was mainly because demons and strange beasts like Hu Linger and Devil Ape had no spirit embryos nor divine treasures. Since they didn't have them, they could only create them by themselves. Now that Hu Linger was cultivating spirit creation technique, she could have her own spirit embryo and even change the form of her spirit embryo. 2 days later, Imperial College finally started. Qin Mu and the other newly entered scholars followed the directorate to the warehouse to pick up their own sword cases, pills, attires, pill furnaces, jade, brushes, ink and tablets. There was also a sack of money which was said to be the official salary. However, Qin Mu heard from the scholars that it was the monthly allowance and could be collected once every month. Even though it wasn't much and only had a dozen coins, it was substantial to the commoners. As long as one became a scholar of Imperial College, he would already be an 8th-ranking official, therefore the Imperial Court had to pay him salary. Qin Mu picked up his items and then came to the front of Hall of Supreme Learning. The young patriarch was giving a speech which was nothing more than to motivate scholars to cultivate and study hard. Qin Mu placed items back into his room and followed the other new scholars to the Hall of Hidden Light for a lecture. There were also royalties that had come to seek knowledge. As Qin Mu looked around, he saw a familiar young lady who was winking at him. However, when she met other people's gazes, that young lady would become aloof. 7th sister, what are you doing? That young lady was Ling Yuxiu, and a prince beside her frowned slightly and asked softly when he saw her looking towards Qin Mu from time to time. Hall of Hidden Light. A man wearing long and black garment knelt with a horizontal sword in front of his knees. He was the directorate of Hall of Hidden Light. His gaze was as sharp as a sword and he gave all the scholars a look. When his gaze landed on Qin Mu, the corners of his eyes twitched. He gave a speech that was neither too slow nor too fast. Hall of Hidden Light is the hall of sword learning. What is hidden light? The saint had said, I have 3 swords, you can choose any one of them, however, they can't kill. The first one is called hidden light, hidden from sight, hidden from use. Even when you touch, you can feel nothing, passing through objects without objects noticing. This is the origin of hidden light. When one reaches this realm, he would become sword god. Qin Mu was astonished and he muttered in his heart, This directorate is the sword hall master of our sacred cult. Sword hall master was in black and had a towering figure and looked very arrogant. When he was blown away by a stab from Qin Mu, he couldn't even execute his moves. However, Qin Mu felt odd. This imperial college was the sacred place of Eternal Peace Empire after all. How did they even recruit the hall master of Heavenly Devil cult? After Sword Hall Master talked about the origin of Hall of Hidden Light, he continued, Sword, when is cultivated to the realm of hidden light, it has reached an excellent realm, the supreme realm, therefore it is known as Tao Sword. And in the world today, only 1 or 2 people have reached this step, and there's only one who is known as Hidden Light Sword God. I'm not nearly as good as him. All of you are scholars from all over the land. You should set the highest realm of sword skill as your goal and shouldn't even slack a day. Today I will teach you the foundation of sword skills, the most basic sword moves like stab, flick, smear, and wave. The scholars in the hall were all incomparably astonished. Instead of teaching profound sword moves, the Hall of Hidden Light in Imperial College was going to teach the basic foundation of sword skills. Was there a need for them to come to Imperial College to learn the basic foundation of sword skills? Sword Hall Master said solemnly, Don't despise the foundation of sword skills. If your foundation isn't solid, all the fancy and marvelous sword moves you learn will be useless. 3 years ago, I met a little child who was only 11 to 12 years old. He had an incomparably solid foundation, and when I contested with him in Spirit Embryo Realm, he defeated me with just a wooden sword. It was then I realized the importance of the foundation of sword skills. A commotion broke out within the scholars in the hall, and a scholar muttered, To be able to defeat teacher with a wooden sword? Is this child a sword god? Sword Hall Master shook his head. Not yet. This child is only 15 years old now. It's impossible for him to reach the realm of sword god. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 130. Blocking the gate to kill the heart. Qin Mu's face turned slightly red because he knew Sword Hall Master was talking about himself. Sword Hall Master should have been pondering about a painful experience. That's why he had put in a lot of hard work in the foundation of his sword skills. Now his skill was no longer as weak and probably had another great leap. It was impossible for him to beat him again in one sword. Sword Hall Master taught all the scholars the foundation of sword form technique, and Qin Mu nodded his head secretly. After comprehending for these few years, Sword Hall Master had already gotten the samadhi of the foundation of sword skill. Even though there were still some flaws, it was a big improvement from before. When the class ended, Qin Mu was about to leave Hall of Hidden Light when Sword Hall Master suddenly said, Qin Mu, stay. Chen Wanyun, Yu Qinghong, and Yun Ke were astonished. The 3 of them looked at each other, then walked out of Hall of Hidden Light. Ling Yuxiu wanted to come forward to find Qin Mu, but she could only drop it when she saw the situation and dragged away by the few royalties. All the scholars of Hall of Hidden Light left, and only Qin Mu and Sword Hall Master were left. Young Cult Master, how do you think my sword skill? Sword Hall Master rose and asked solemnly. Qin Mu said, Your improvement is very big. Sword Hall Master had a fervent gaze. How is it compared to yours? Qin Mu thought about it and shook his head. You're still lacking some maturity. Your foundation is not as stable as mine. Furthermore, even if your foundation was as solid as mine, you wouldn't be a match for me. In the same realm, my cultivation is way stronger than yours, and my techniques are also much better. You're too focused on sword and neglect the rest. Therefore, you are not a match for me in the same realm. However, your improvement is already very big. Sword Hall Master gave a disciple's greeting and asked with a solemn expression. That's why I would like to ask young Cult Master to give me 1 or 2 pointers. I've taught them just now, and now I'm requesting young Cult Master earnestly to teach me. Qin Mu was calm and sat down. All right? You are the hall master of my cult after all. There's no harm in giving you pointers. Sword skill is not only sword skill. The body technique, exercise method, fist skill, spirit embryo are equally important. The sword you just taught them had yet achieved uniting them as one. Sword Hall Master asked, how to unite them as one? Qin Mu imparted him the stab sword form that village chief had taught him, and Sword Hall Master suddenly saw the light and muttered to himself, this is actually how to exert one's strength. Wrong. So the sword I had been cultivating for 100 years was all cultivated wrongly. Thank you, young cult master, for the pointers. Meanwhile, outside Hall of Hidden Light, Chen Wanyun and the rest had grim expressions. Yu Qinghong was in fury. Directorate is actually biased and giving him special treatment, teaching him sword skill personally. His sword skill is already not weak, and if there is a directorate deliberately training him, how would we have the chance to win him? Chen Wanyun said indifferently, there's no need for all of you to worry. No matter what wonderful sword skill directorate imparts to him, he will definitely not be my opponent. I'll just have to grab the weakness in his technique and I'll beat him. Be that as it may, but you can't drop your guard. Yun Ke reminded. Chen Wanyun nodded his head. Don't worry. When he's improving, I'm improving as well. These few days I'm suppressing my realm and feel like I'm about to touch the border of Six Directions realm. With my 5 elements realm's battle prowess at its peak, how can I not take him down? Receiving directorate's teaching will only waste his energy to cultivate the new sword skill and make him no time for cultivation. To beat him at 5 elements realm is my wish, otherwise, I would have regrets even if I become a divine arts practitioner. The 3 of them totally didn't expect that what they had guessed wasn't the situation in Hall of Hidden Light. Sword Hall Master was now like a student and Qin Mu was then the teacher, giving Sword Hall Master pointers on how to cultivating sword. If the 3 of them saw this, their eyeballs would probably pop out. Sword Hall Master memorized how to unite many as one in his heart, and Qin Mu thought of something. Even though my foundation is very solid, I have not many attainments in sword skills. I require Hall Master to give me pointers too. Hall Master said just now that the saint had 3 swords and you only explained the first sword, Hidden Light, and didn't mention the other 2 swords. What are the other 2 swords? Sword Hall Master replied, first sword Hidden Light, second sword Carry Shadow, and third sword Night Drill are actually the 3 realms of Tao Sword. These are the words written by Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor in his Sword Theory, which was acclaimed by the Emperor as Son of Heaven's 3 swords. You asked me to give you pointers, but I don't dare to. The sword skills achievement of a student is decided by his teacher. I can teach them, but I don't think I'm qualified to teach you. Qin Mu understood what he meant. It would be the best to find a famous master when learning techniques. Monk Ming Xian of Great Thunderclap Monastery was an example. His master had not thoroughly understood Thunderclap 8 strikes. Therefore the Thunderclap 8 strikes he had imparted to Ming Xian had a flaw. The same logic applied here. If Sword Hall Master had not comprehended a move completely and taught it to Qin Mu, in that case, Qin Mu would inherit his flaw. Therefore, if one wants to learn profound ultimate arts, they must have a good teacher. Qin Mu's expression wavered and he asked, where can I read sword theory? Floor of Heavenly Records. Sword Hall Master continued, young cult master. The book tablet is the pass to enter Floor of Heavenly Records. As long as you have the book tablet, you can enter Floor of Heavenly Records to read the collections. Qin Mu's spirit was greatly aroused. He had not yet been to Floor of Heavenly Records. Over there were the collections from all the sects and clans in the entire empire, so how could he not go? Young cult master hasn't had your lunch, right? Sword Hall Master gave a rare smile and invited, I'm also going to have lunch. Why don't you come to my humble home? I just have some queries to ask young cult master. We can talk as we eat. Qin Mu hesitated. There a little fox still in my house. Just bring her along. Qin Mu and he left Hall of Hidden Light together and returned to Scholar's residence. Hu Linger was currently cultivating spirit creation technique, and when she heard to go eat, she immediately ran out in excitement. Is there wine? Yes. Sword Hall Master replied. Hu Linger cheered and immediately drove her demon wind to follow. The 2 men and 1 fox came to the residence of Sword Hall Master. The place where Sword Hall Master stayed was very simple. It was also a courtyard with 2 entrances and 2 exits, and he didn't even have a servant. Qin Mu looked around and saw that there were no other people here. Sword Hall Master cooked the dishes by himself and was very fast. It was obvious that it wasn't his first time cooking at his own home. Sword Hall? Don't you have a wife? Qin Mu asked bewilderedly. Wife? The cooking speed of Sword Hall Master was very fast. By using his true fire to cook the food, how could his speed not be fast? This middle-aged man soon served the dishes and scooped the rice. Why do I want a wife? Troublesome. Hu Linger tasted the dishes he had cooked and was astonished. It's really delicious. Sword Hall, your culinary skills are so good and much better than many of the chefs in the capital city. Why don't you find a wife? I had once. I had a good time with a woman of the cult when I was young, but that was when I was young and insensible. Sword Hall Master reminisced the past and shook his head. Then I discovered that sword could bring me more joy, and the joy woman can bring me is inferior to my sword. Therefore I thought, why the trouble? So we broke up. Young cult master, women are definitely trouble, so don't find a woman. They would want you to carefully spend time with them and make them happy, frequently acting coquettishly with you, scratching you. We have to focus on cultivating, and cultivating sword can bring us more joy. Woman can't bring us joy, therefore you must firmly not want woman. Hu Linger was startled and argued. Sword Hall, what you said is wrong. What's bad with woman? Sword Hall Master's vital chi hummed, and it sounded like countless of sharp swords clashing. He said indifferently, you absolutely don't understand the joy cultivating sword can bring me. There's no use explaining it to you. Qin Mu blinked his eyes innocently. Sword Hall's realm was too high, and he still didn't understand this realm now. The 2 men and 1 fox finished their lunch, and Sword Hall Master asked Qin Mu some more questions before going into deep thoughts, not saying a word for quite a while. Qin Mu was about to bid farewell when Sword Hall Master woke up again and rose. Young cult master, I won't bother to see you out. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he waved back at him. Sword Hall sure has a strange temper. He shook his head. No idea whom the girl he was in love with back then. I might be able to fix them back together. However, with Sword Hall having such strange temper, I reckon they would break up again after getting back together. He returned to Scholar's residence and saw numerous scholars walking down from the mountain. The scholars from Royalties Park and Scholar's residence were also all walking out and heading down the mountain. Qin Mu was bewildered when he suddenly heard a voice. Brother Qin, over here. Qin Mu looked over and only saw Wei Yong among the crowd, thus he went forward. Hu Linger asked, Fatty Wei, what's going on? Wei Yong smiled. You have no idea? I've heard that a Taoist came to the bottom of the mountain and claimed to be from Tao sect. He brought a disciple and sat at the bottom of the mountain, blocking the way. Qin Mu was astonished and said, They're blocking the gate. Wei Yong nodded and said, They're indeed blocking the gate. Tao sect is the biggest orthodox sect, and the Taoist blocking the gate called himself Dan Yangzi and the youth beside Daozi. A directorate went up earlier to inquire, and they said they were not here to find trouble but to interact. He said he had long heard that Imperial College was the #1 scared ground in the world. It took in all the talents in the world. He, therefore, had brought Daozi of Tao sect to come visit Imperial College and validate the skills and divine arts between Tao sect and Imperial College. Qin Mu's heart slightly shook, and he let out a murky breath before saying slowly, What a great strategy. Wei Yong was puzzled. They are attacking the heart. Qin Mu's gaze flickered. There are various sects taking the chance to rebel outside the capital city and raising flags to crusade against Imperial Preceptor, but the capital city is still considered peaceful. It's obvious the commoners are supportive. Imperial Preceptor is reforming the sects and founded primary schools, colleges, and Imperial College to take in all the talents in the world, gathering them all as the students of Son of Heaven. Therefore all the scholars in the world are for the use of the Emperor. I've heard people saying that Eternal Peace Empire is actually a sect disguised as an empire. If Daozi of Tao sect blocked the gate and none of Imperial College's scholars couldn't defeat him, then what's the use of Imperial Preceptor's reform? Wei Yong stared blankly and muttered, This is not just attacking the heart. This is killing the heart.